Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It's May 14th, 2026. I'd like to call the business meeting, the governing board of the South Florida Water Management District to order. First on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll ask Colonel Roman if you'll lead us in the pledge, if you'll all stand and face the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, Charlotte. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see you all here. Vice Chair Wagner is not going to be able to join us today. I'm going to ask that all our board members make sure your microphone is on and that you please speak into the mic so online attendees can hear you. Members of the public on Zoom who wish to address the board can use the raise your hand feature. If members of the public are having any trouble and need help, please go to our website, which is sfwmd.gov, and click the Ask Us button at the top of the page. If you're using a phone and you'd like a comment, please press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute and unmute. As a courtesy to others who wish to speak, members of the public are asked to comment only once on a topic. We'll take public comment first from those who are here in person and submitted a comment card, followed by those with raised hands on Zoom. We've got a bunch of employee recognitions, and we'll move over to Executive Director Bartlett for that.
All right, let's get rolling. Our May 2026 Employee of the Month is Josh Feltner, Senior Environmental Professional, Real Estate Bureau. So Josh joined us recently in 2022, and he got really busy. And what he does for us is he does a lot of sort of the land management type activities with respect to environmental issues across the district. And for example, Endangered Species Act considerations, monitoring, wildlife monitoring, soil remediation, hazardous waste profiling and disposal. Basically, he looks out for those remote cattle dipping units that are out in the countryside. And he touches a lot of stuff. The C-44 basin, monitoring for apple snails. The EAA reservoir at STA, monitoring for benthic invertebrates, just for evaluations. Cypress Creek wetlands restoration, basically soil remediation across that platform. Dealing with the citrus groves, former citrus groves in the C-23-24 reservoir, profiling and disposal efforts of soil contamination, C-43 reservoir. It goes on and on. All the types of parcels, from the smallest parcels in the Shingle Creek to the 10,000 acre acquisition of Green Heart of the Everglades, Josh is involved. For our STAs, he has sampled thousands of cubic yards of soil for STA suitability, looking for those contaminations, right? He deals with illegal dumping across our district, including household debris, animal waste illegal dumping, gasoline drums, liquid waste, wastewater disposal. Basically, he's all over the place dealing with this, making sure we're taken care of. And so you can see he's an incredible employee, incredible for the district, but why is he May's Employee of the Month instead of every month he's our Employee of the Month? Because he recently received the Rising Star Environmental Excellence Award from the Treasure Coast chapter of the Florida Association of Environmental Professionals. And we know we have great employees, but it's great when other people recognize that same thing and give our employees awards. And Josh recently got that, and he does a great job. It was a great opportunity to recognize him as our May Employee of the Month. Congratulations, Josh. All right. So our May 2026 team of the month is the Future Flood Control Study Delivery Team, consisting of, take a breath, Madahel Ansar, Carol Ballard, Eli Brossel, Luis Colon, Nicole Cortez, Courtney Deal, Jennifer Gent, Jakia Gray, David Griffin, Nimi Jayakumar, Bob Muricalo, Benny Ortiz, Yanni Herrera Osorio, Ray Palmer, Armando Ramirez, Sandra Smith, Tarana Soleiman, Lisette Sori, Julio Tejeda, Jageth Vithanage, Walter Wilcox, Vincent Wu, Hong Ying Zhao, and we had a couple of contractors that helped us on staff, Francisco Pena and Aaron Ducaster. And also in the audience is Lenny Villalpando and Jennifer Gerardo from Broward County, who were instrumental in helping this happen as well. That's our team of the month for May. So, we all know that the South Florida Water Management District has a challenge in our future with flood control. The system was designed 60 years ago for a certain population that's grown much farther than we expected, so we have a lot of urbanization coupled with sea level rise on our southeast coast, and so we need to plan for the future. And this team helped us take a major step in planning for the future for 8 specific canals in Broward County. And this was a 203 study where we do this study, we send it to the Corps, it gets to Congress for authorization in 2026. So this is a major effort. You've seen feasibility studies done for CERT projects. It's long, it takes a while. We've done 2 of those as 203s. This is the first flood risk management study we've done. It's a different type of evaluation for these 8 canals. It takes a different type of modeling that we learned and executed over and over again as we looked at alternatives and iterations. It took engineering for these 8 canals and all the structures associated with them to actually design the solution up to a 30% design. So you can do a very detailed and thorough cost estimate, which is part of this feasibility study as well. There was public engagement, consultation through endangered species and tribal consultation, SHPO, all the consultations, real estate evaluation, extremely thorough and detailed real estate evaluation, legal review. This, I mean, it's pages and pages of documentation that we uploaded. We didn't print them this time. And this took 1.5 years for us. That is lightning speed. We are good at this at the South Florida Water Management District. And we did it in 1.5 years. If you look at core policy, they say no more than 3 years. Heck, we'll just half it and get it done. Get it toward a 2026. It wouldn't happen without these folks and these partnerships, but particularly it wouldn't happen without this team of the month, and that's why they are the team of the month. Congratulations. You can have to lead the pack. You run this agency. I know. Good morning. Big team. Took all of us. right. We got a few service awards, Mr. Chair. We have a 35-year service award for Dana Winston Page. He's an HR manager in Human Resources Bureau. Now, Dana came to us in 1991 as a human resources assistant at the Water Management District, and she was a curious person, so she really wanted to get back to school and look for ways to learn more about business management. So she got, while working at the district, a bachelor's degree in business management and certificates, with a number of certificates in human resources. And that allowed her to get a lot of experience in HR. She was an HR assistant, but then she was a staff and senior business management analyst and an HR generalist and an HR manager within human resources. Since she's been here for 35 years, she's seen a lot of change at the Water Management District and helped us manage a lot of change, including she played an instrumental role in the district-wide implementation of SAP, which is our administrative system that really underpins a lot of what we do in operations at the Water Management District. And SAP continues to evolve. You know, we talk about it frequently, and Dana's been there the whole time. Her manager recently captured the sentiment we all think about Dana, and she said, Dana displays a level of professionalism that is rare and invaluable. She is a steady hand that guides our recruitment and employment teams towards success every single day. Now, I am very proud of our support systems at the Water Management District, whether it's finance, budget, IT, HR, bar none, we've got the best. I assure you of that. And Dana absolutely contributes to the HR piece of that, where we have an incredible team over there. When she is not guiding our recruitment and employee retention and relation efforts, she's channeling her creativity into art and cherishing time with her daughter and grandchildren. And we're so honored to have Dana with us for these 35 years. And thank you, Dana, for your service. All right, another 35-year service award, Mark Wilsnack, Section Leader, Hydraulic Design, Hydrology, and Hydraulics Bureau. So Mark came to us in 1991. He came from the Maryland Water Resources Administration, where he was doing hydrologic data and a number of groundwater flow modeling stuff. He is currently the section lead of Hydraulic Design Section, so he's worked a long time here, 35 years in fact. And he's a section lead of hydraulic design, where they honestly do a lot of our hydraulics in the district, including the flow computation for nearly 1,000 water control structures and pump stations, so that we know how much CFS is going where it needs to go. It's kind of important to us. He also conducts, his team conducts in-house hydrologic design and modeling work. And so that team is very much in the middle of the design for the 203 study we just talked about, but also SEP South, SEP North, Western Everglades. Whenever we're putting a structure in or something like that, they're part of that design work. Prior to his current position, he was a principal engineer to the district for almost 10 years in SCADA and hydro management. He was also a lead senior supervising engineer for 11 years in the department's hydraulic and environmental system modeling. Mark knows what he's doing. Clearly, he's been here a long time and doing a lot of work. But while he's been here for 35 years, he's authored and co-authored 75 different publications for peer-reviewed journal papers. That's a pretty good rate. I could read you what they all are. Trust me, it's a lot of scientific words. But he's also been a diplomat. Been named a diplomat for the American Academy of Water Resource Engineers, a fellow for the American Society of Civil Engineers, a fellow for the Environmental and Water Resources Institute. And in 2017, he was the outstanding peer reviewer for the American Society of Civil Engineers Journal of Hydrologic Engineering. It's a pretty smart guy, that Mark. And finally, he's a registered professional engineer in 3 different states, Florida, Maryland, and South Carolina. Born in Wisconsin, raised in Maryland. He's an outdoor enthusiast, running, swimming, spending time with his family. Mark gets it done for us, and we're so happy for his 35 years of service, and thank you, Mark, for your 35 years of service. All right. Mr. Chair, we have a 45-year service award with us today. Yep. Dennis Morrissey, stationary diesel engine operator. So he came to us in 1981. Now, I remember saying the 90s doesn't sound like that long ago, but 81 does sound like a little while ago. And he came to us as part of the survey crew. We're using old survey technology. And he surveyed around Lake Okeechobee and Kissimmee and like heavy wooded areas and stuff like that. And obviously we depend a lot on survey. But he did that until 2005. And then he went into structure maintenance at the Clewiston Field Station. And while he was at the Clewiston Field Station, he did cross training in pump station operations. And in March 2007, advanced to a role of operator of our pump stations. He's consistently proven himself to be dependable and capable. He knows all the pump stations in the Clewiston area of responsibility. Obviously, our pump station operators are really key to our success here at the Water Management District, and he's one of those guys that steps up when he needs to step up, is always there and available. And of course, we can't talk about pump stations without talking about the commitment to that operation during storm events. In 2022, he was reassigned from his longtime home at the S3 pump station to support operations in the S8 pump station. And in October of 2023, he was reassigned to the G508 pump station as the lead operator at the G508. That's a big responsibility. But since January 2025, he was the guy that we put out at the C43 reservoir. If you don't know, we got a new pump station out there, and we needed someone experienced to break that thing in and test it and run it through the trials, and now it's being used to put water in the C43 reservoir. And so he's been there helping us get that online, and while we'd love to have him for another 10 years, he's decided to retire in November of this year. We're still trying to talk him out of that. Anyway, he has lived his life in LaBelle, Florida, so he got to see the C43 reservoir come out of the ground, and now he's there working on it with a really nice commute. He certainly is an outdoorsman, and he really is an enthusiastic hunter, and he's been a great pump station operator for us and surveyor before that, and we're just so grateful for your 45 years, Dennis. Thank you so much. I am going to turn the floor over to Charlie Martinez for the next portion of ours. We got a mic for you. Okay, so
Hello, hello, there we go. Okay, so it's that time of the year. I get to hand off this beautiful jacket. Obviously, we all see a lot of purple going on. There's a reason, Water Reuse Week. We know how important water reuse is to the district. Anytime you see those purple pipes out in any of our structures, they're carrying water reuse, and it's obviously helping us not to go to the more conventional sources of fresh water. About 20 years ago, I guess this tradition was started, where Governing Board Member Rooney showed up donning this a jacket. Didn't look quite as good with him as it does with me. But he did show up wearing a purple jacket, so it started this tradition. And I am very honored to be passing on this beautiful purple jacket, might not be quite this one, to Governing Board Ben Butler. And this would have given a new meaning to one size fits all if I would have been able to give him my jacket, by the way. Ben, wear it in good health. I have actually become a fashion influencer on Instagram, so if you want to just look me up, I'm doing a really good job making money off it. So congratulations, Ben.
Well, I just knew they'd never find a jacket in my size, and this day would never come. Robert, Tom, hang around long enough, it's coming to you. No, Charlie, thank you. And certainly from an agriculture standpoint, I understand the importance of having water and water resources. As a dairy farmer, recycling water is what we do. Not quite the same as the purple pipe water, but no, I appreciate everything we do at the district and what this district and what this staff does in all our discussion today in making sure we're meeting the needs of the population and having enough water to go around. And certainly water reuse is a big part of that. With that, if you've seen Saturday Night Live and Chris Farley, I'm channeling my inner Chris Farley. It's still a little small, but thank you, Charlie.
Well, thanks, Drew, for that. We'll move to agenda revisions. Molly, are there any revisions to the agenda this month?
There are none, Mr. Chairman.
Great, now we'll go to abstentions by board members. I'm gonna poll the board. If you have an abstention, let me know. Otherwise, let me know that also. Mr. Spotswood?
I have none.
Thank you. Mr. Bergeron?
None.
Mr. Steinle?
None.
I have none. Colonel?
None?
Mr. Martinez?
None.
Mr. Butler?
None, sir.
Mr. Hurley?
None.
Thank you. We have no abstentions. We now go to the Big Cypress Basin report with the chair of the Big Cypress Basin, Colonel Roman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On April 24th, the Big Cypress Basin Board met. We began our meeting with the Basin Administrator, Lisa Keeler, provided an overview of the upcoming tasks needed to complete the Corkscrew Watershed Initiative. This planning study is designed to identify viable short and long-term projects to achieve ecological restoration of the Corkscrew system, which includes improving the historic hydrology in Audubon's Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary. Ian Bartosek, representing the Conservancy of Southwest Florida, provided an overview of the organization's Burmese python research and removal program. He highlighted the Conservancy's use of scout snakes, pythons fitted with radio transmitters to locate and remove breeding females. Since 2013, this method has enabled the removal of 1,750 pythons weighing 53,000 pounds in Southwest Florida. Next, the board received an overview of the basin's proposed tentative budget funding for fiscal year 27. Lucine Dadrian provided an update on BCB capital projects, highlighting ongoing design and construction efforts, and introducing 2 new projects proposed for fiscal year 27 funding. These new projects will help protect groundwater supplies while balancing enhanced flood control. The presentation outlined a proposed tentative $6.7 million capital budget for the fiscal year 27. Tom Sutterfield provided an overview of the SCADA communication needs with the completion of the Big Cypress Basin Tower. In total, 87 of the 106 basin SCADA sites will be connected to the microwave backbone, making the basin more resilient. The total proposed tentative budget for fiscal year 26-27 is $547,500. Rory Feeney presented an overview of the current and upcoming regional land management projects. The staff activity manages 82,000 acres of land and 124 miles of canals within the basin. The project includes vegetation management, prescribed burning efforts, and public use and recreational opportunities in the Corkscrew Regional Ecosystem Watershed, and also Green Heart of the Everglades. The proposed tentative budget for fiscal year 26-27 is $1.3 million. Rich Virgil detailed the maintenance activities for the Picayune Strand Restoration Project as the project transitions from construction to full operational status. The proposed tentative budget for fiscal year 26-27 is $2.1 million. Carolina Moran and Anushi Obesa-Kara updated the board on the lower West Coast water supply conditions. We closed our meeting with technical and staff reports, and the next Basin Board meeting is scheduled for July 7th, 2026. That concludes my briefing, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone have any comments or questions about the Big Cypress Basin report? Hearing none? Thank you, Colonel.
Thank
We'll go to the approval of the minutes of the April 9th meeting. Does anyone have any changes to the minutes of the April 9th meeting? Hearing none, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? Hearing none there, we'll call that question. Mr. Spotswood?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Bergeron?
Yes.
Mr. Steinle?
Yes.
I'm going to vote yes. Colonel Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Martinez?
Yes.
Mr. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Hurley?
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. We'll move to the Executive Director's report. Mr. Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the legislature did convene this week in a special session to talk about the budget and passing the budget. The special session does continue through to next week. As of today, there's been a little bit of movement, but really not a whole lot of decisions made, so there's nothing new to report during that special session. Leading up to it, they did figure out the funding allocation for general revenue that goes to agriculture and natural resources, which includes Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services and Florida DEP, which then funnels to us. They agreed to a total budget coming out of general revenue of $1.38 billion, which is $158 million less than last year, but still substantial. Moving on to water shortage, so obviously it started raining. There's two things to report. Through our efforts and the efforts of the city of Cape Coral, we were able to rescind the Phase 4 restrictions in that one portion of Cape Coral and move it back to a modified Phase 2, which means that folks using the Mid-Hawthorne Aquifer with a private well can now water once a week. We saw the aquifer rebound, and as I've shared with you, the data graphs, and Dr. Moran has as well, to the point where we could do this action. And that's a result of not only our water restrictions, but the really good efforts that the city of Cape Coral has done by prioritizing running city lines which don't use the Mid-Hawthorne Aquifer up into the area of concern. And they're getting a remarkably high hookup rate for those lines that they're running up into that area. There's been another part of Cape Coral where this did occur. We saw the wells rebound to a perfectly healthy condition, so we know this works. And so we were comfortable with that move to allow more use of the Mid-Hawthorne Aquifer in the interim. The other thing, we rescinded the water shortage warning for Glades and Highlands County. With the recent rainfalls, we've seen a rebound, and we're comfortable in that area from a water shortage standpoint at this point. The other thing I wanted to update you on is basically the progress we've made after signing the MOA and MOU, after the governor signed that with the Department of Army last July, which did two things: expedite EAA reservoir construction, and then look for a new model where the district builds SERP infrastructure with federal funds, as well as the projects we do with state funds. So the EAA reservoir, we had a celebration out at the EAA reservoir with the governor, Assistant Secretary of the Army Adam Tell, and Major General Kelly, among others, to really celebrate that all the contracts are now in place with the companies to expedite the reservoir construction to finish in 2029. I was out there yesterday. It is a busy construction site. Seeing a lot of activity happen out there. Yesterday, there was kind of a ceremony that the Corps did with an embankment contractor to basically signal the very first laying of dirt for the building of the embankment. So that's that EAA reservoir is still on track. We got a report yesterday to be done in 2029. Our part of that does involve the other half of the MOU, which is building federal infrastructure with federal funds. The Corps calls it a 1043B agreement, where they will provide us federal funds and we will use that to contract for the construction. Two agreements we had to come up with or craft with the Corps. This is fairly new. It's definitely new to SERP, fairly new to the Corps, definitely new to this administration. So we're breaking new ground here. And basically a total of 4 agreements, but really for 2 projects. And that is the seepage pump station with the EAA reservoir, which needs to start construction to meet 2029, and then the Blue Shanty Flowway. And so I'm proud to report that this week, working with Corps staff, we did come to agreement on the language for those agreements. I will later today send up the final agreement language to the Corps, where they'll start their signature process. And then basically we're lining it up to get those signed July-August timeframe, so that we can get underway with contracting in the September timeframe for both the seepage pump station and the Blue Shanty Flowway. So things are progressing very well with them, and I was very happy to report that to you. Moving on, just wanted to basically let you know of a couple of special awards that were provided over the last few weeks. First of all, that really intersect what we do here at the Water Management District. So Governor DeSantis gave the Medal of Freedom to Paul Tudor Jones, Mary Barley, and the legacies of Nathaniel Reed and George Barley for their leadership in Everglades restoration. And if you didn't know, Nathaniel Reed was a governing board chair here at the South Florida Water Management District. So that was very much an Everglades recognition. The other one is the Florida Commissioner of Agriculture and Consumer Services, Wilton Simpson, named Ernie Barnett the winner of the 2026 Agricultural Environmental Leadership Award for his efforts in balancing the environment and everything. Ernie obviously played a major role with Everglades restoration while both at Florida Department of Environmental Protection and here at the Water Management District. So congratulations to all of them for their efforts, and thank you for their efforts for helping us get to where we are with our incredible water projects. Last thing I want to talk about is there's a lot of conversation right now about putting clean water in the Everglades through our stormwater treatment areas. There is because on May 1st, we started our first water year where we have a QBEL to try to achieve with the stormwater treatment areas. Because of that attention, we've been looking at, and Cassandra's updating her slides for your reports every single board meeting to let you know how things are going with the stormwater treatment areas. But also starting, June will be the first one. We give you a one-pager for SERP update. We give you a one-pager for NEEP. We're going to provide a one-pager for the stormwater treatment areas as well. The first one will come in June, where we'll reflect on the water year 26, which is the last water year that ended at the end of April. And we'll present the data, what they're looking like, how the outflows look. So you and the public who's having this conversation will have the data and everything associated with those stormwater treatment areas, plus all the efforts and activities that the district is doing to manage the stormwater treatment areas. Because obviously we all have the goal of getting clean water to the Everglades, and so we've got a strike team, we've got all kinds of efforts around putting clean water in the Everglades and managing our STAs optimally for water quality. So that'll start in June. And then, since we're in the new water year, we'll put it out maybe quarterly, how we're doing for the current water year. So you'll get STA one-pager on how we're doing for the current water year, plus the activities that we're implementing, so that you and the public and everyone will have what's going on with our stormwater treatment areas. So that's about all I have right now, Mr. Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks. Does anyone have any questions for Executive Director Bartlett?
Drew, I
Simon?
just got pinged by my son who wakes up and reads Instagram news and everything.
Oh,
And
nice.
I had seen this on the news, but maybe a quick update about the fires that are getting a lot of attention down south, and from the perspective of these, the Everglades before we got here went through this quite a bit,
Right.
and it's sometimes a very healthy occurrence, but just maybe an update on that.
Sure, I may turn it over to John for more details on that, right? Oh, good. So she has an update in their conditions report also. But what I will say is that we did have wildfires in the Everglades. They were not peat fires, right? And so wildfires are generally healthy for the Everglades. We have to obviously monitor them and manage them for protection of the human environment. But as far as a natural burn in the Everglades, that's okay as long as it's not a peat fire. So, and we didn't see any of those.
I'd like to say a little bit about the fires. Like Drew said, I'll be brief, but as far as the environment, the fires have really helped the environment. I know there's concerns with the public safety and stuff of that nature, but as far as the environment's concerned, long as the muck has moisture, which it has, well, it's very good for the environment.
Thanks, Mr. Bergeron. We're going to move now to public comment. It's our first public comment period. If you're here to comment on a specific agenda item, we'd ask that you hold that comment until we reach that item on the agenda. This comment period is for general comments not related to agenda items. Public comment on consent agenda item is item 12 on the agenda, and public comment for the discussion agenda will be heard after that presentation. The public has had an opportunity to provide written comments prior to this meeting. We did not receive any e-comments. And is there public comment now?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll begin with Newton Cook, followed by Elizabeth Accomando.
All right, thank you. The third appendix I have here is, believe it or not, from fishing red snapper a year ago. And I bumped up against my son's Mee Island boat, and it's not doing real well. The nerves from my shoulder to my foot, so that's the problem. So do not be disturbed. I'm going to still be here a while. Two subjects that just came up, but not on my list here to talk about. Fire. You cannot burn enough. If, one of the points, we got to be, why am I not burning the lake? Where's the Corps? Why am I not burning? We got the opportunity of a 10-year anyway. And these fires down in the Everglades, you couldn't ask for anything better. Don't fight the fires in Florida. It's natural every 5 years or so for this entire state, from Panama City to the Keys, to burn. And if you want a natural, healthy ecology, you gotta have fire. Of course, you gotta keep it out of houses and stuff, but you gotta have it. All right, Lake O's doing wonderful. But we didn't do anything about it. Corps didn't do anything about it. District didn't do anything about it. Mother Nature fixed it for a while. We have a drought. We all know that. In fact, talking about the ducks, we're pretty sure it's going to be a 3 duck limit this year, not 6, because everything in the north is also dry. We got about 5,000 acres of SAV back. We need 25,000 minimum. The problem we have is we're even today spraying out the vegetation as it comes back. We need to cut the spray, and the Corps here, thank you. We need to cut the budget for spraying on Lake Okeechobee, if not the whole state, to 50%. If you cut it to 50%, then the people that do the spraying are going to actually pay attention to where it needs to go. Right now, it's just everywhere. It's a friggin' disaster all across this state. And I am not one of the stop the spraying radicals. I know we have to do it. I know it's important, and if we have to do it, but what we have now is wrong, and it needs to be investigated, and it needs to be fixed. The lake itself, the wet season is coming, and although it's beautiful right now, clear, fishing's great, couldn't ask for anything better. The first windstorm and rainstorm we get with the wet season, it'll flip the bottom of that lake in the muck, and we'll be right back, pun intended, in the soup. Right back in the soup. It only takes one windstorm and the rising of the water too fast if we have a hurricane or a rain event. We have to address the muck in the bottom of the lake. It's an almost impossible chore. It's an extremely expensive chore. The only way I know over all these years is deep injection wells that would take that muck to the floor of the Atlantic Ocean. The only way I know it can be done in a reasonable cost. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Next, we'll hear from Elizabeth Accomando, followed by Ben Olson.
Good morning, Governing Board, Chair, staff. I'm Elizabeth Accomando, and I am the Board President of Indian Trail Improvement District. And I am here today to share a celebration with you. But first and foremost, before I get into all of that, I want to thank each and every one of you, the board, the staff, and everyone worked so hard to get this amazing and long-awaited project completed. And that project is the completion of the east end of the Corbett Levee. And as some may or may not know, in 2012, Tropical Storm Isaac set its sights on the acreage, and the levee failed. And the people in the acreage, nearly 50,000 residents, were underwater for almost 2 weeks. Feet of water. People were driving down the road in airboats and boats and jet skis. And so while this project was a tremendous undertaking, the West End was done fairly rapidly, and with the help not only of South Florida Water Management, but other local and state officials, we were able to get the funding, and now it is complete. So we cannot thank you all enough for the tremendous and impactful role that each and every one of you played to make this happen, to protect the residents of the acreage on the east side and the west side. So with that being said, you will find, if it's not there already, in your emails an invitation to a very special morning where we're going to have a ribbon cutting on 94th Street, just on the south side. So we're not going to interfere with anything at the Corbett. It'll be right near our maintenance yard. And we really hope that each and every one of you that cared about this project, that saw it to fruition, will please join us in this celebration and the protection of our residents. So again, I thank you all. We couldn't be more grateful to everyone. So we'll see you. It'll be June 1st at 9 a.m. So pencil that in. And like I said, the invitations are forthcoming in your emails, and everyone is welcome. Just let us know, because we're going to have some light refreshments. And the parking is going to be a little tricky because we really don't have parking. So we're going to park along 94th, but we're warning all the neighbors so nobody gets upset. So again, thank you all so much, and I appreciate you and your time and your care about our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Accomando. Next, we'll hear from Ben Olson, followed by Mitchell Latzman.
Morning, Governing Board. Last Friday, I received a letter from an attorney representing the Seminole Tribe of Florida titled Statements Made About the Seminole Tribe, Its Leadership, and Its Representatives. I want to start by saying the letter was very polite, but it addressed my research paper, WERP, the Seminole Western Everglades Housing Project. In this letter, the attorney for the tribe stated that the tribe and Chairman Osceola categorically and unequivocally deny all allegations of wrongdoing, unlawful activity, conspiracy, misrepresentation, sabotage, manipulation, and withholding of facts required to be disclosed by law, as related to McDaniels Ranch Reservation and as the reservation relates to WERP. The letter also requested that I no longer speak publicly about the tribe and or its leadership, asking about activities which I questioned as unlawful, wrongful, or even criminal. The letter went on to say that the tribe has no intention of preventing me from voicing valid concerns, but that the tribe takes issue with statements I have made which go well beyond my concerns for my family's property, the environment, and the specifics of WERP's design. The letter also on multiple occasions offered for me to sit down with this attorney of the tribe to discuss these concerns, as he put it. So shortly after receiving the letter, I reached out and we set up a meeting, which hopefully will happen soon. Respectfully, I wholeheartedly disagree that these concerns I've raised go well beyond my family's land or the environment or WERP. Likewise, respectfully, I will continue to ask questions in public until there are actual answers to them. The first 90 or so pages of my research were objective, concrete evidence of incredibly questionable actions taken by tribal staffers and leadership. The following 10 pages or so were current or ongoing issues at the time of releasing the report. The final summary and conclusion are what the letter seemed to take issue with. As I've said almost every month coming up here, if I'm incorrect, I'm happy to acknowledge it. I only ask what evidence there is that I got it wrong before I conclude as such. Since releasing this research, Seminole representatives have said that I'm conspiratorial and slanderous, and have categorically denied everything in my research pointed to. But they offered no facts in response to explain why Seminole staffers pushed so hard to change WERP's initial design, how a reservation was kept hidden from staff of every agency involved in Everglades restoration for nearly 3 years, or what this company between the chairman and Hendry County Commissioner created in the middle of the McDaniels Ranch land transfer was otherwise for. In 2023, the commissioner himself described this company by saying, quote, Hendry County doesn't do business per se with the Seminole tribe, but Hendry has an incredible relationship with the tribe, and we do everything in our power to make sure we have a good relationship with him. That was his response to being asked what the company was for. So I appreciate the offer to meet with Seminole headquarters, and I'm happy, ready, and willing to do so, but these will be the same questions I ask in that meeting. What this process needs is transparency and open dialogue. If all the concerns I've raised are unequivocally denied, then I'm happy to hear the explanation of what I got wrong, and I'd be just as happy to point out everything I got inaccurate, if any, publicly. What we cannot have, Governing Board, is suppression of public participation, which the tribe has acknowledged they don't intend to do for what they deem as valid concerns. I'm actually coming in a little ahead of time, but I appreciate all of you. The purple looks fantastic, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Next, we'll hear from Mitchell Latzman, followed
Mr.
by...
Chair, I'd like to thank Ben. You know, he's the next generation. I don't know whether y'all seen his report investigating going back over a century ago. And at the end of the day, the most important thing as we move forward with Everglades restoration is that we're truly restoring the environment. There's a lot of trust with the wonderful funding we've been getting, but I just want to compliment you, Ben. Everything you've done. I don't know whether y'all have seen his research. If you want a copy of it, I can get it to you, but it's really interesting that actually shows the natural flow a century ago to make sure that at the end of the day that we're truly restoring the environment, we're restoring whether it's tribal land, public land, or private land. We all live in this world together, and the most important thing is that we all learn, so we make sure we manage water compatible with the environment and all the plant communities as we continue to go forward, truly restore this environment together. So I want to thank you, Ben, personally, for everything you've done. He's dedicated his awful lot of time to this, and I've read his research, and it's extremely interesting. So thank you, young man.
Thank you, Mr. Bergeron. Next, we'll hear from Mitchell Latzman, followed by Mark Perry.
Morning, everyone. Mitchell Latzman, Science and Policy Analyst for Friends of the Everglades. First off, we'd like to thank Governing Board member Thomas Hurley for his interest in our recent STAs in Cuba report, as well as our Rescue the River of Grass campaign, which outlines the need for more storage and treatment south of Lake Okeechobee. We would also like to extend an invitation to each and every one of you to come meet with us to discuss these issues. And we would love to also set up a workshop with the district related to STAs in the Cuba. Everglades restoration is at a crossroads. Do we complete the projects on the books and call it a day, or do we actually finish the job of restoring the Everglades and make it a healthy flowing system again? Friends of the Everglades' recent report on STA performance, as measured by the Cubal standard, pulled data from the past 5 CEFRs and truly highlights the underlying problem. Our report showed that not one of the STAs is in compliance with the Cubal standard ahead of the water year 2027 deadline when the Cubal starts to apply. If we can't flow clean water with what we currently have, how are we going to increase flow volumes? The short answer is we can't. The EAA used to hold 2.2 million acre-feet of shallow storage before being drained for sugarcane and other crops. Today, after losing 50% of the historic Everglades watershed, we only need about 1.25 million acre-feet of total storage, with 25.6 thousand additional acres of treatment. This will solve the Everglades water quality, flow, and depth problems, as well as allow us to fully decompartmentalize the system. The EAA reservoir only gets us 19.2% of the way there, not enough for the Ailing Lake, estuaries, Everglades, and Florida Bay. These numbers are taken from published studies as part of our Rescue the River of Grass campaign, and not coincidentally are similar to what the district had in their River of Grass project back when 180,000 acres of sugarland was available for purchase. If this is the case, then why does every other watershed, whether in the Caloosahatchee, St. Lucie, or north of Lake Okeechobee, have a goal for water storage, but not in the EAA? This is a huge oversight and one that could potentially keep us in perpetual crisis, especially if the land needed is lost forever to development or industrial use. And of course, we cannot create storage without adequate treatment, as water would not be able to enter the Everglades without causing harm. So Friends of the Everglades' answer is Rescue the River of Grass. We need to buy 102,600 acres of land in the EAA for an additional 1 million acre-feet of water storage on a 77,000 acre reservoir with 25.6 thousand acres of treatment. We're already seeing sugarland coming out of production for rock mining, and IFAS's own predictions show tens of thousands of acres could be unfarmable and hundreds of thousands of acres only farmable with rice in the next 25 years. Now is the time to act. Now is the time to show what's left in order to finish the job of Everglades restoration. Our communities and ecosystems depend on it. Our livelihoods depend on it. Our health depends on it. And we must stop shifting harm from community to community. The only way we can solve
Please
this
wrap up your
problem is
comments.
together. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Mark Perry, followed by Nyla Pipes, who's participating online.
Morning, Governing Board. Mark Perry, Executive Director, Florida Oceanographic. We do have a lot to do in water management, and you all are basically leading the charge in that to all throughout South Florida. Particularly what it gets down to is when we look at restoring systems and everything is storage, treatment, and flow. And we really got to kind of pay attention to how we're doing that. And sending water south is really important from Lake Okeechobee, especially with the new LOSUM schedule. We've got to send it south. So we've got the lake right now about 11.4. We like to get it at 11.5 right around June 1st. That's ideal for tropical storm season. But Water Conservation Area 3A is sitting at about 7.9 feet elevation when it should be at 9.63. So we're really low in the water conservation areas, and thus we're getting fires and all kinds of dry situation. The EA Basin, as you know, has runoff basically every year, and then water year to water year, we see about 1.2 million acre feet going through the STAs and into south from the EA Basin. The EA Basin runoff is governed and controlled by a lot of the permits. You have Everglades Works of the District permits, which permit all about 174 of them within the site that the EAA that has great capacities for pumping water into the works of the district. In fact, in 50,000 acre permit for one of them, it's 21,000 GPM is able to be pump capacity. And as John Mitnick always tells me, they can outpump us and they can put more water into the works of the district than you can handle. So what I encourage you to do is to really review those. Permits are coming up in 2027 for renewal. And the reason is there's, we wrote a white paper in 2023, and one of those references was about how do we solve this issue about storage in the EA. And there's a paper done in 2018 by scientists out of University of South Florida, geologists out of North Florida, Central Florida, and they basically said there's storage within the water table. If we let the water table up to about 61 centimeters, about 2 feet from the surface, we can actually store about 1.2 million acre feet. And if we let it go up to, to 45 centimeters below the surface, we can actually get about 2 million acre feet of storage under the EAA. So there's storage capacity if we managing that water table correctly. The water table also raising helps to reduce subsidence. As you know, we dry out those soils, they get aerobic, the microorganisms dissolve those organic soils, and those muck soils just disappear. That subsidence has gone down to 6 feet in Belle Glade at the staff stadia board you can see at the Everglades Center. I encourage you to do that. The last thing is thank you for the NEEP report. You always hear me talk
Please
about
wrap up your
NEEP.
comments.
And we appreciate that workshop that happened and continue to work on BMAPs and get that done.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Next, we'll move over to our online participants, starting with Nyla Pipes, followed by Ryan Rossi.
Sound check?
We hear you.
Fantastic. Nyla Pipes, One Florida Foundation. First and foremost, I appreciate the conversation about the fire. It's important that we recognize that the Everglades was shaped by fire and flood from the very beginning. So fire is very much a natural part of the Everglades ecosystem. The sawgrass is fire dependent. Many of our other native vegetations are, and the fires also help to keep those sloughs open so that we can send more water south. So while I don't ever want to see the muck fires, I'm really grateful for Mother Nature doing its thing and us seeing some fire in the Everglades this year. Since we're also talking about the Q Bell, because it's that time, I appreciate the updates on the STAs, and I encourage you to give those updates as often as possible. Those of us who work in the advocacy and work with the public realm, public communication realm, all the information you can give us helps us to keep the conversation balanced and informed, which helps you because then you don't deal with so many people who are angry and upset with misinformation that sometimes gets put out. And on that note, with the rainy season beginning, I want to once again remind everybody that our problems in the estuaries are not just Lake Okeechobee discharges. I'm incredibly hopeful that we won't have any damaging releases to the St. Lucie River or the Caloosahatchee this year. Obviously, we want the water that the Caloosahatchee needs. But our problems in the estuaries are also local basin issues. We know that our estuary basins are both higher in nutrients than the water that we get from Lake Okeechobee every year. And we also see this time of year a huge spike in fecal bacteria with every rain, right? It's that first flush, literally. So I just want everybody to keep that in perspective because as we move forward, it is important to have real conversations with real information and not just play the blame game. You know, it always floors me when people are sitting at this sandbar in Stewart and they're totally cool with the fact that we have no algae, but nobody, seems to care that there is fecal bacteria impairment in the St. Lucie River. So yeah, I'm calling out some of my friends and people that are my neighbors, but if that's the way you think of things, I encourage you to really adjust your thinking and recognize that with that fecal bacteria, we also have the nutrients, and those nutrients feed the algal blooms. It's not all just Lake O. And I think it's really important that we acknowledge that for both our estuary basins as we head into the rainy season. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pipes. Next, we'll hear from Ryan Rossi, followed by Matt DePaulis.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We hear you.
Good morning. Ryan Rossi, Director of the South Florida Water Coalition, and thanks as always for the opportunity to comment. For most of the year, I've made comments on water supply of focus at these meetings, particularly with the severe drought that most of Florida has been in. The good news, and I heard a little bit of that today, is that we've received some recent periods of rain, and today's drought report shows that conditions throughout our coastal communities at least have improved a bit in the last month or two. Regardless, our water supply should remain a priority. We have many stakeholders who are invested in our water supply and have good reason to continue seeing that it's managed appropriately. And of course, that includes the 7 million residents and businesses here in South Florida. As an example, focusing on Palm Beach County, their population is expected to grow to nearly 2 million people within the next 2 decades. And I think that while that seems far off, it requires good planning today. And I think it requires investment in alternative water supply sources, because I think it's clear the current path won't entirely be sustainable. And while those alternatives are developed, it requires that in the meantime, we continue to manage our water to accommodate our current needs today while we look ahead. As an example, and I know that we all know this, Lake Okeechobee still serves as that backup water supply resource for coastal communities, so that ensuring that water is available if necessary is critical for our present supply needs. So I'm glad that there are discussions that are always going on that are making alternative water supply investments a priority. I think we got to keep those discussions going, especially as we witness both changes in weather and to our communities that require our water supply needs to be addressed in the short and long term. Thank you. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rossi. Next, we'll hear from Matt DePaulis, followed by Mike Elfenbein.
Hello, everyone. Matt DePaulis, the Environmental Policy Director for the Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation. Thanks for the opportunity to provide comment today. Happy Reuse Water Month to everyone. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. Today, I really want to focus on the lack of water that we're still getting in the Caloosahatchee Estuary, and just try to find out where this disconnect is, because seemingly we're still aiming for 350 cubic feet per second moving through that S79, and we've been seeing zero flows earlier in this week for multiple days. And it sounds like there must be some disconnect somewhere, because the Corps is saying that there's the ability to get the water down. The district is still saying that we want to hit that 350 goal at S79, which is, again, still below, well below that MFL level and far below the minimum flows that we really need to be in optimal conditions. And this is a really important time for the estuary. We've been starved for so long, but now we're right in the middle of oyster spawn. We were out on the water last week, and we saw, or 2 weeks ago, excuse me, we saw tape grass is still in the estuary, well west of Beautiful Island. We're seeing new tape grass sprigs that are present. They're small, they're starved, they're thin, they are clearly exhibiting signs of salinity stress, but they are there, and they are new growth. So we really need to be managing for this system into the future in a way that it is going to persist and be supportive of the ecosystems and the communities that rely on a healthy estuary in this area. We have water in the lake. We were on the call last week where we heard that there's no real risk to water supply going into the rainy season. And so we need to be in a situation where we're actually managing for the estuary and the health of the estuary, utilizing that water that we've been supposedly holding back, so that we're not going to be in a position where we're going to have cutoffs later in the season. Well, here we are later in the season, and we're seeing zero flows through S79. It ticked up a little bit today based on that rain that we had in the basin last night, but we're not seeing anything on a management side that is reflective of actually needing to respond to the needs of that estuary. So I would implore the water district staff, governing board to ask questions of why we're not able to hit that 350 cubic feet per second, why water's not moving out of the lake in a way that gets to the S79, why there's no water moving through the C43 despite that ribbon cutting happening last July. And hopefully we can get some answers that's not going to result in a collapse in the estuary. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. DePaulis. And next we'll hear from Mike Elfenbein.
Good morning. How are you all? Sorry I can't be there in person, but I appreciate the opportunity to participate online. This is Mike Elfenbein. I am the executive director of the Cypress chapter of the Isaac Walton League. And Newton's comments to lead off public comment prompted me to take a moment and share with you all the great success that we're having as a result of the leadership of the district, the NEAT program, your incredible staff, and amazing governing board. We have been removing, Newton, check it out, we have been removing muck from Lake Istapoga, and we have not been injecting it into the earth. We've actually been putting it on pastures to grow hay. Some of you might have driven by 98 on the north side of Lake Istapoga and seen those big, giant, white marshmallow-looking things in the pasture. And what you're looking at is the exportation of nutrients from a water body through the earth into grass and eventually into cows, hopefully far, far away, where those nutrients will no longer pollute our Everglades from the top down. And we have the district and their incredible staff to thank for taking the chance to fund such an incredible project. We are removing tens of thousands of pounds of phosphorus and hundreds of thousands of pounds of nitrogen from the water body, and doing that through the muck, moving muck at rates of over 500,000 gallons a day of muck being removed from Lake Istapoga. And through the leadership of the district, other agencies like DEP and the Department of Agriculture, which had an incredible presentation at the workshop, and unfortunately I couldn't make that, but our state is doing everything in its power to address these issues. I'm grateful to be at the forefront of that experience, and just want everybody to know that there isn't some incredible work being done led by the district to take these nutrients out of the system and finally address the elephant in the room, which is the muck that is not just in Lake Okeechobee, but the entirety of the system. And I just wanted to make sure people understood what a great job you guys are doing at the district, and take these 3 minutes to highlight that effort. And thank you all very much for your continued support, and look forward to working with you into the future to continue to address these problems. And you know what? Maybe we will meet those Q Bell numbers. So thank you all so much for your time. Wish I could have been there in person. Look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Elfenbein. Mr. Chairman, that concludes our general public comment.
Well, thank you all very much for your comments. We appreciate them. We're going to move now to board comment, and I'll start over on my right with Mr. Spotswood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not much for me this morning, but I did want to highlight a comment from Ms. Pipes related to fecal matter. And being from the Keys, we dealt with this a lot. Septic to sewer conversion, it's an expensive thing to deal with. It's painstaking, and it's not perfect down there. We still got some work to do, but it's not something I'm seeing talked about enough in some of these areas in terms of septic seepage and the pollutants that come from those sources. So wanted to highlight that, and certainly think it's something that we should focus on and make sure we're educating the general public on those issues.
Thanks. Mr. Bergeron?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As always, I want to thank my fellow board members. It's an honor to sit with all of you and our wonderful staff. It's just amazing, the staff we have, and the leadership of Drew in helping us have a quality of life and clean drinking water in Florida. About the fires, as far as the fires really is a benefit to the environment, and especially there's enough moisture in the muck. If we had muck fires, that would be a little different story. You know, in moving water south, I want to thank Drew and our whole team and John as we continue to work forward to move water south beyond the Tamiami Trail. We have meetings once a month with our staff and all our federal partners. And just a little update, the road should be finished in August. And we're working on other barriers that have to be removed to move water south. And it looks to me like at the rate we're going, for the first time since 1915, when we started across the Tamiami Trail and completed it in 1928, we're going to be moving water south. To me, the Tamiami Trail will allow 2.5 million to 3 million acre feet of water to equalize across a global system. That water never goes in a reservoir. That's the volume of water we started 25 years ago to reach Florida Bay and stop the high water events in the Central Everglades and Big Cypress and Fakahatchee and Picayune and Panther Refuge and stop seagrass from dying in Florida Bay. That is the biggest step of benefit that we'll see in the past 25 years. And I just want to thank our staff and thank our federal partners in regards to making that happen. Also, I was honored to give y'all 52 years of history, all going back to 1973, 74, in the greatest preservation of land in modern time, the Big Cypress Preserve. This has been a Bible to me. And I can remember sitting there. I'm 30 years old when I entered this arena of saving one of the natural wonders of the world. And there's an awful lot of history here that can guide us. Sometimes when you look at the past, you can learn by it. And I hope this will help guide all of us at the end of the day to save one of the natural wonders of the world. And the one thing that I tell everyone, we're not just saving the wildlife and God's landscaping, we're actually saving our drinking water and our quality of life for future generations. And I can't tell you how proud I am to be a part of that with all of you and all of our stakeholders. I think we have the most committed stakeholders that care about the future. And I know I'm certainly very proud of that. I do want to recognize my daughter, the vice president of the Birds Run Everglades Foundation. I'm certainly a proud dad to see the next generation, just like I'd mentioned with Ben Olson. That's the next generation that can carry this forward. And so thanks to all the stakeholders, thanks to our staff, thanks to the board. We're going to make this happen, and I'm proud to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bergeron. Mr. Steinle.
Ron, thanks for this booklet of information, and in particular, I appreciate the stickies where it can direct me to the most important points. So I don't necessarily have to go through all 400, but I can focus on the key details. So
And the key points are highlighted through this
So you
52 years of history.
make it easy.
It's highlighted as a guideline for all of us.
No, I mean, that's really important. I don't mean to joke about it, but it's, this is great. Thank you. And I probably would, a lot of your main points, I would echo. I mean, this has been a pretty interesting season, right? We've gone from a dry season where we've had to, maybe the first time we've been on the board, put out, I think, right, severe water restrictions. But and we're heading into the wet season, and it's always a good reminder for me that the system has to be built for both extremes, and often for a drought and a flood in the same year. So I think it's good to sort of recognize the district's job, what we all work to do in terms of operational flexibility, in terms of storage, in terms of regional coordination, and projects that everyone works so hard to complete and operate. And it's noticeably important, I think, for all of us in the state when we have these pretty severe weather variables. As Florida, and in particular Palm Beach County, grows, I think it's also important to keep reminding folks that water infrastructure and Everglades restoration aren't separate conversations, that the conditions of the waterways, the flood protection, water supply, and even the long-term our property values, they're all interconnected. So I want to thank the staff, the district. It's an honor to be up here helping you guys. I want to thank the governor and the legislature for the financial support, and in particular the taxpayers who help us achieve all these things. And then Drew, I think, it's been mentioned a couple times, so it's worth exploring on the spraying, herbicide spraying. I do really think that there is some validity to if you think that there's overuse of a product, potentially. If you reduce or make budgets more efficient, it makes people work more efficiently too. I'm not saying that is what I know to be happening, but I think it's certainly worth exploring that sometime in the near future. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. Colonel Orland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a few items this morning. First of all, I want to start off by congratulating Ben Butler on his purple jacket. Purple suits you, and it really looks great on you, and I hope that this will help you engage in the conversation throughout the district and advance reuse water in those conversations that are so important to conservation and our water supply. So congratulations, Ben. Also, I want to congratulate all the awardees that Drew had mentioned in his executive report. It was a wonderful ceremony to see the Medal of Freedom be presented by the governor. Very, very special day, not just for the awardees, especially for them, but also for those of us in attendance. So it was very, very nice. And I'd also like to congratulate Ernie Barnett for his award. Long time coming, Ernie. I see you sitting in the back there. Congratulations, well deserved. Thank you, Mr. Bergeron, for the notebook. That's some late night reading material, I'm sure, but there's a lot of pages there, and it took a lot to put that together, so thank you. Yesterday, I was out in the green heart of the Everglades with Rory Feeney and Rick Bauer, the land managers, and also Lisa Keeler from the Basin Administrator for the Big Cypress Basin. And what a beautiful, beautiful piece of property, the small portion that I saw. And as you recall, Governing Board and staff, that we acquired that piece of property around 2 years ago, roughly when we were in the Naples area for our Governing Board meeting. And it's around 11,000 acres that straddles the Fakahatchee Strand and the Big Cypress Preserve. So it's wedged right in there between two incredible habitats. And we were so fortunate to get that. And in walking the land yesterday, some of the land anyway, it was clear to me that there are going to be some wonderful recreational opportunities that are going to be afforded. The habitat straddles 41, so there's a northern section north of 41, and a southern section south of 41. The northern section is more wet prairie and hardwood hammocks that will lend itself to maybe some hiking trails. And the southern portion is more water-based recreation, which will lend itself to some kayaking and some low-intensity water enjoyment. And it's stretched all the way down to the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Visitor Center. And it was so wonderful to see that beautiful facility. And as you looked over the open water, our boundary for Green Heart of the Everglades was in that water. So it really encompasses just about everything. And obviously that comes with challenges for land managers, right? But it's going to be absolutely phenomenal for not only us, but our citizens and for preservation. So I wanted to share that with you. And if you have a chance to get out there, try to make some time, because it's beautiful. But again, it's just at the very beginning of us looking at those opportunities. Also, I want to give a shout out to Ellen Ellen. She was recognized for her 40 years of service in the district. And I got to meet her several years ago at the Picayune Strand Restoration Project, where she was working veg management. And I'd like to give her a special thank you, because in her recent work, she realized that our partner agencies that were also doing vegetation management out at the Picayune Strand Restoration Project were all on different contracts. So she took it upon herself to work with all 3 state agencies. We have a contract as the district, and then FWC has a contract, and then Forest Service has a contract. And so she was able to get everybody on the same page in terms of the contract. And as a result, she saved money for some of the sister agencies that we partner with, and coordinated, more importantly, the vegetation management work. So special shout out to Ellen Ellen. That's what that 40 years of experience lets you be able to do, right? Because you can see these things and pull it all together. So thank you so much. The other thank you I have, it goes out to the Conservancy of Southwest Florida and Ian Bartizak. You heard in my report that he's the biologist with the Conservancy that works the science behind their python research. They're primarily looking at the management. I spent a day with them down at the lab, and they're looking at the management of this invasive challenge to our ecosystem. And they use scout snakes that are fixed with transmitters. Well, the challenge with that is these transmitters don't last forever. So they have to go out and get the scout snake, remove the transmitter, put a new one on. So that is a challenge in and of itself. So there's a need for a new and improved transmitter technology that's cost effective. And if there are any innovative technology types out there that want to come up with something like that, I'm giving you a challenge where the transmitter would last longer and it wouldn't be so manpower intensive to remove and replace those transmitters every so often. One thing that's exciting about the research that the Conservancy is doing is they have pre-restoration data on the Picayune Strand Restoration Project. So as we go forward with that project, and in years to come, we'll be able to compare that data. So just a request for all those smart types who are into innovative technology. I attended the Corkscrew Watershed Science Forum, hosted by Audubon. Excellent forum on everything to do with the watershed. And as you know, the district and the Big Cypress Basin is leading an effort called the Corkscrew Watershed Initiative. I want to thank Laura Lehman and her team who made an outstanding presentation at that forum. This is exciting because we're coming down to the end of this project. It was a 3-year planning study to identify projects that we could do right now or plan for in the future that will improve the hydrology of the watershed, particularly surrounding Corkscrew Audubon's Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary. without impacting flood protection, right, or our water supply. So this is exciting because the team, the technical working group that has representatives from Lee County and Collier County, and all other agencies have been able to put together a suite of projects that are currently under modeling. So we're moving forward and getting results. So we should all be proud of that. Let's see if I have one thing. The only other thing, no, I have two other things. One is that wildlife crossings for 41. I want to make sure that south of the Picayune Strand Restoration Project, I want to make sure that someone has eyes on that from the staff and is still talking with FDOT about planning for that. I'm sure you do, but I haven't heard about it for a while, so I just want to make sure that if I need to engage, that you reach out to me. And lastly, Drew, a suggestion was made during public comment regarding the STAs and the QBEL. Give that some consideration. Maybe there is a need for a presentation as a minimum or maybe a workshop. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Colonel Roman. Mr. Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just simply want to say also thank you to my fellow board member, Ron, for that book that you provided us. Ronnie, you make us all better. You make this board what it is, and we really thank you for what you are. You're a wealth of knowledge. We learn something from you every time we come to these meetings. So thank you, and also congratulate and say thank you to Ben and to Miss Bergeron for your courage and your advocacy. I'm sure the Newton Cooks of this world are going to be able to say, okay, so maybe I can start resting a little bit. The younger folks are taking over, and we're in a good place. So thank you all, and thank you, Ron.
Thanks, Mr. Martinez. Mr. Butler.
Thank you, sir. And picking up where Charlie left off, I don't know that Newton's been here since the last RAC-REC meeting, have you? Newton, thank you for your service there. I said at the last meeting, I think it was, but you weren't here. I think that was at a wedding. And but thank you for your service there and facilitating that. Again, Charlie, thank you for the jacket. Nice jacket. I mean, it's I'm getting there. I'm stretching it a little bit. But one of the stories I forgot to share while we were down there getting recognized. My farm, every so often, I forget how long our consumptive use permit lasts. But one of the requirements of receiving our consumptive use permit is that we have to find out if reuse water is available, and we can connect to it, and it can be used in lieu of some of our practices. So we get a list of utilities to call. Of course, my closest utility to call is about 25 miles away, and they haven't established water reuse yet. Maybe Spring Lake will get around to it, but yeah, maybe we can work on that. But and then that'd be a long pipeline. I don't know that I'm ready to bring a pipeline all the way to the farm from there, but it is but confirmation that that when we again it's the district and stepping up and requiring you before you can get a consumptive use for freshwater permit. Make sure that there's not some options to use water, reuse water. So congratulations there. Finally, we've had a lot of, Drew, you recognize a lot of awards. You had the Governor's Freedom Award, and he's here in the audience today. I'd be remiss of not recognizing Mr. Barnett as is that 2026 recipient. And congratulations coming from a 2007 recipient. My family received the Commissioner's Ag Leadership Award back in 2007 and it was a family award, but for everything that we had done at the farm. So I have a lot of respect for that award. And Mr. Ernie, I have to believe you may be one of the only or first individual, right, to be recognized. And so it is. It's certainly that's a prestigious recognition, and congratulations. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Hurley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, today's meeting is 1 year that I've been able to have the honor of serving with you guys. And you all said it was going to be drinking from a fire hose, and it's definitely been that. but I'm filled with gratitude. Obviously, the information you gave us today, Ron, is terrific, and I learned so much from all of you. It's a big district. I'm kind of stuck on the East Coast, but it's great to get your perspectives, and I learn a ton every meeting. They say, great organizations rise and fall on leadership, and in this year I've really come to appreciate that and the leadership of this organization. The awards this morning, 35 years and 45 years, says a lot about the organization and the leadership. It takes great people at the top. It takes loyal and dedicated and excellent people all the way down through the ranks. And as I've gotten a chance to get out and around the district, sort of acquainting myself with all the systems and operations and equipment, top to bottom, that's been what I leave almost every interaction with, that appreciation of just the dedication and excellence. So, and as far as the outside stakeholders, I've had an opportunity to be with a number of stakeholder groups, Mark Perry and Eve and Gil, and they've all been very helpful in bringing me up to speed on the issues that affect our little corner of the world, but also the district-wide. So I'm grateful for that. So just grateful today, and just keep it up, and I hope it starts raining.
Thanks, Mr. Hurley. Congratulations to you and Mr. Spotswood on your 1-year anniversary today, and congrats to Ben on his purple jacket. You wear it well. I'd like to thank all my governing board members, my colleagues up here, for being so eloquent, and I'd like to associate myself with all of your remarks. And I don't want to repeat them all, but I would specifically like to say thank you very much to our Governor DeSantis. His continued support for Everglades restorations is just amazing to me. The 1043B process, which sounds geeky, is so important, and without it, we wouldn't be anywhere near as far as we are, and we're going to make huge progress because of it. I'd also like to thank Assistant Secretary Tell for his cooperation and coordination with that. We're moving forward so much faster with restoration for America's Everglades because of it. So I thank everyone for making that happen. I also want to thank the governor for recognizing the Barleys, Paul Tudor Jones, and Nat Reed, who's always been a hero of mine, for their work. We wouldn't be where we are today without them. Ernie, in the back there, thanks very much for all your work on this, and congrats on the award from FDOCS. It's well deserved. FDOCS, very well deserved. We're going to move now to consent. Is there any board member who wants to move any item consent to discussion? If not, is there public comment on consent?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We will begin with Caitlin Newcamp, followed by Mark Perry.
Good morning, Chair and Governing Board members. It's good to see most of you here today, and congratulations, Ben, and to Spotswood and Hurley on your 1-year anniversary. We just want to comment on number 18 on the consent agenda. So we support the district's continued implementation of distributed water storage and nutrient reduction projects under the NEAT program. We are encouraged by the Snakeland and Cattle Water and Nutrient Retention Project as a practical land-based approach to improving water quality and enhancing system storage in the Caloosahatchee watershed. The project's ability to provide approximately 1,800 acre-feet of annual water retention, along with measurable reductions in both phosphorus and nitrogen, represent an important contribution to the BMAP goals. We also appreciate the district's use of working lands partnerships to achieve water resource objectives in a cost-effective manner. Leveraging existing ag landscapes for water storage and nutrient retention is an important strategy for scaling solutions across the watershed. Overall, Audubon supports this project as a constructive step towards improving water quality, increasing system resilience, and advancing restoration objectives in the Caloosahatchee Basin, and asks that the district continues to build out more projects like this in the Lake O and Northern Estuary watersheds. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Newcamp. Next, we'll hear from Mark Perry.
Good morning again, Governing Board. Mark Perry. On the consent agenda, we just 2 items, item 15 and 18. 15 was just curious to me that we have this 3-year kind of commitment of land in the EA for construction, which is phenomenal that the district owns that. But I'm wondering about why we weren't considering maybe a lease to that because you want to get the land back afterwards. So, but I understand there may be liability issues or other kind of terms and conditions that I'm not aware of. But item 18, obviously the storage, treatment, and flow is what I'm talking about. And as was mentioned by the folks that, the dispersed water management program is really excellent. And we're trying to get storage and treatment within all 3 of these watersheds, as you keep hearing me talk about, is the Caloosahatchee, Okeechobee, and St. Lucie watersheds. And part of NEPA is really helpful because all the shareholders within those watersheds are trying to get to those targets, to try to get to those targets of to meet the TMDL by their target dates, whether it's 2032 or 2028. And the Caloosahatchee has a long way to go in that area. I mean, but this project getting 2.7 tons of nitrogen out of the system, and you take out over 10 years, is going to be annually over 10 years. That's going to be a lot of removal of nitrogen. But it's their starting load is about 3,600 tons of nitrogen, and they've got to get down to about 1,300 tons of nitrogen. So there's a lot of work to do. But if you look for the cost benefit on these kind of dispersed water management projects, I got to believe that they're better cost benefit ratios than building huge regional projects with huge, massive, very expensive reservoirs and STAs. But let's keep doing, whenever we got the opportunity, these type of projects. So we, again, wholly support item 18.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Mr. Chairman, we have no additional public comment on consent.
Thank you both for your comments. Board members, consent agenda item 15 requires a 2/3 majority, just so you know. And if there's no further discussion on consent, can I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and there's a second. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, I'm going to call that question. I'll start with Mr. Spotswood.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Bergeron.
Yes.
I'm going to vote yes. Colonel Rowan.
Yes.
Mr. Martinez.
Yes.
Mr. Butler.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Hurley.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. We're going to go now to discussion. We have the Alternative Water Supply Funding Program with Stacy Peisno. It's all about purple.
My name is Stacy Paisno. I'm a lead project manager in the Water Supply and Flood Control Planning Bureau. Today I'm going to be giving a recap of the FY27 FDP Alternative Water Supply Program, the application process, and at the end of the presentation there are 2 resolutions for the board to consider approving. Before I get into this, I would like to congratulate Mr. Butler on being the latest recipient for the Purple Jacket, and as always you can reach out to our section and we're happy to help with any questions you have. You may recall from past presentations, the alternative water supply includes brackish water, reclaimed water, and capturing excess water for later use in things such as aquifer storage and recovery wells and reservoirs. We get asked a lot of times, why is alternative water supply so important? More than 3 billion gallons of water are used every day in Central and South Florida by 9.4 million residents and millions of visitors. Over the next 20 years, the population is projected to increase to over 11 million, and correspondingly, the water demands for all water use categories will increase by over 350 million gallons per day. Based on our water supply plans, we know that traditional freshwater sources are insufficient to meet all future demands, and thus alternative water supply and water conservation are vital. Governor DeSantis signed an executive order which continues to request recurring annual funding for alternative water supply development. The governor and the legislature have recognized the importance of these projects in protecting Florida's natural systems, and over the past 7 legislative sessions have allocated $335 million statewide. The current House and Senate bills for the FY27 budget include up to $50 million in statewide funding. The governor originally requested $60 million in statewide funding. The district is required to submit a project list to DEP by the end of May every calendar year. And since fiscal year 20, the district has allocated over $79.8 million towards 106 alternative water supply and water conservation projects previously approved by the governing boards, and will create or save over 54.7 million gallons per day. That is nearly equivalent, or 96%, of the 2025 Upper East Coast public supply demand. We released an application on December 1st, and it closed earlier this year on February 26th. We hosted 2 Zoom webinars in January. Those are available on our YouTube channel. We received 25 applications. 3 of those did not meet the eligibility requirement and were not moved forward in the internal review process, and those are identified as other on the figure. The figure on the screen is a general location of those 25 applications that we received. Those applications totaled over $1.3 billion in total construction cost, with eligible phase and implementation cost of over $184.5 million, when our requested funding is going to be $63.8 million for all of those projects. Projects will create 15.5 million gallons per day of new capacity, over 2.2 million gallons per day of reclaimed water or brackish water distribution capacity, and approximately 0.3 million gallons per day of estimated water savings. As a reminder, we're requesting for all the projects $63.8 million. There's only going to be $50 million proposed statewide. The next few slides are a recap from information presented during previous governing board presentations. As part of the DEP AWS guidance document for all the districts, we're required to provide that prioritized list based on some of the following. Projects should provide regional benefits. They need to support an MFL water body if applicable. Additional benefits that we should consider are things that support flood control, water quality via quantified total phosphorus or total nitrogen reductions. Projects need to be shovel ready, have permits and funding in place, and undergo a cost benefit analysis. In addition to those DEP considerations, the district has additional alternative water supply considerations, such as we want them to be consistent with our water supply plans. Such projects could include production capacity increases for reclaimed or brackish water facilities, alternative water supply development to minimize saltwater intrusion, and green infrastructure type projects. Reducing dependence on traditional freshwater sources, any project that supports an ocean outfall legislation, so those are to reduce or eliminate discharge treated wastewater to applicable facilities, utilities in the lower East Coast, and resource limited areas. For water conservation, some additional considerations include the source that's being conserved, the estimated water savings, and the cost effectiveness of those projects on a cost per 1,000 gallons. Historically, the program's governing board priorities have considered that applicants must be within the district or provide benefits to our district. Needs to be alternative water supply or water conservation. Those projects can only be construction or implementation costs, meaning we don't fund operations and maintenance, engineering, permitting, or pilot projects. Those projects should support the district's mission and or a regional water supply plan. We do prioritize projects based on regional or resource considerations, such as a restricted allocation area or a statutorily defined area such as the Central Florida Water Initiative planning area. The year-round irrigation ordinance and the water supply facilities work plan status eligibility requirements only apply to local governments and not private entities. And I have some good news is that every local government applicant this year met those eligibility requirements. For transparency, all of the project applications are in my presentation today, and we'll spend a little bit of time on each slide. We don't expect you to go through them today because we've reviewed them with you individually, and they're included in your packet. As we've previously discussed, some of the projects were ineligible for being operations and maintenance concept, or they were not an alternative water supply project. And as a reminder, no project is guaranteed funding or the requested funding allocations that we submit forward. And again, reminder, there's only going to be 50 million statewide. My resolution A is for staff is seeking approval of the projects listed in Exhibit A, the authorization to submit the list to DEP and enter into any agreements with DEP for legislative appropriations we receive. Mr. Chair?
Thank you very much, Stace. Is there public comment on this, Molly?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We'll hear from Caitlin Newcamp, followed by Mark Perry.
Hello again, Caitlin Newcamp with Audubon, Florida. Thank you for the helpful presentation. So Audubon supports the district's continued implementation of, Audubon appreciates the district's continued investment in alternative water supply and water conservation projects through the 26-27 funding program. We support efforts to secure diversified water supplies and ensure long-term reliability for South Florida's communities and ecosystems. This is also kind of related to consent item 20 as well. So we would like to offer a broader framing consideration for the program. Much of the current AWS portfolio is focused on expanding supply rather than more aggressively addressing underlying demand, particularly outdoor irrigation demand, which remains the dominant driver of peak water use and long-term system stress. A stronger emphasis on demand reduction, especially in high consumption irrigation, would reduce the scale and cost of new supply infrastructure needed in the future. Reclaimed and alternative water supplies should also be prioritized for higher value or more essential uses where feasible, rather than primarily supporting ornamental irrigation. We also want to highlight the increasing reliance on saline source development and reverse osmosis systems. While these technologies can play a role in a diversified portfolio, they come with some cost implications and unresolved challenges with brine disposal. In addition, Audubon encourages the district and DEP to consider whether this program could better integrate policy and regulatory alignment with source aquifer protection, particularly for aquifers that have been stressed as of late that we mentioned earlier, like the Mid-Hawthorne and the Sandstone aquifers. Strengthening roles or resource allocation approaches in these systems could help prevent over-reliance on new supply development in the future and reduce the risk of regional shortages. So overall, we definitely support the program's intent and continued funding, while encouraging a more balanced strategy that prioritizes demand reduction, safeguards groundwater resources, carefully evaluates long-term costs and trade-offs, and ensures that limited reclaimed water resources are directed towards the most beneficial and sustainable uses. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Newcamp. And now we'll hear from Mark Perry.
Morning again, Governing Board. Mark Perry. We're all about alternative water supply because there's just not enough water available for our potable water systems that are capacity. We used to depend a lot on the shallow water aquifer up here in the Upper East Coast, and looking at the 52 inches or so of rainfall to recharge that aquifer. We're more and more now depending on the Upper Floridan aquifer, bringing that water up and doing reverse osmosis and providing water supply for our communities. But we got to keep in mind that kind of aquifer systems that are those natural recharges to those water systems. I did want to mention too, and you did mention in the presentation about those ocean outfalls, ocean discharges. And I recall years ago when we got the legislature to finally kind of pull those back and go, and there were 6 ocean outfalls from here down to Miami, and they were discharging about 384 million gallons a day. And we were doing everything we can to finally get those going. And 2009 was the first one that started to shut off and take that water back and put it through wastewater treatment and advanced treatment to be able to do reuse. And I really applaud the efforts that all of those communities, all 6 of those, have done to try to pull back those discharges and reuse that water. Again, we waste a lot of water, and for flood control and other purposes, we have discharged over 1.7 billion gallons a day to the Atlantic or Gulf, and it's really operationally we can do better. operationally, we as a water management can really do better to hold that water back, to let it flow down through the Everglades, to recharge the Biscayne Aquifer and other aquifers that need to be recharged so that we can have adequate water supply. I recall, Hollywood, City of Hollywood not too long ago had to move further west with their well fields because of saltwater intrusion. So the more we can kind of put forward that natural flows, those natural systems to help recharge those. We've lost wetlands. Wetlands in Florida used to be over 20 million acres. We're down to about 9 million acres. And we really, need to preserve the wetlands we have, restore the wetlands we can, like the Everglades, in order to recharge these aquifers in order to have water supply for the future. But anything we can do for alternative water supplies, the better off we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Mr. Chairman, we have no additional public comment on this item.
Yep, thanks. Thank you both for your comments. Is there board questions, discussions on this item? If not, is there a motion for the first resolution?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks. I have a motion and a second. I'm going to talk slowly and give Mr. Spotswood a chance to get back in the room. If there's no
I think he'll be detained, Mr. Chair.
What's that?
I think he'll be detained. I don't think he'll be back.
Oh, that's right. That's
Yep,
right. Thank you.
you.
I appreciate that, Drew. In that case, we'll call that question. Mr. Bergeron. I'm going to vote yes. Colonel Norman?
Yes.
Ms.
Yes.
Martinez, thank you, Ms.
Yes.
Butler. And Mr. Hurley. Thanks. Resolution 260507A passes unanimously. And
For Resolution B, staff is seeking authorization to enter into agreements with cooperating entities who receive legislative appropriations.
thanks. Is there discussion on Resolution B?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none, call that question. Mr. Bergeron? I'm going to vote yes. Colonel Norman?
Yes.
Ms. Martinez?
Yes.
Mr. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Hurley?
Yes.
Thanks. That passes unanimously. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
We'll move to technical reports. We have Mr. Mitnick and Dr. Armstrong.
All right. Morning, Mr. Chair and fellow board members. As we get into the water conditions report, we'll start where we always do with the rainfall. You'll see, looking back over at least the last 2 months, there's been a very slight surplus of rainfall there in March and April. The March one was primarily due to a rain event right there at the end of March. But for May, you can see sort of this transition month as we start moving into the start of the wet season, and I'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end of the presentation. But as Drew said earlier in his remarks, this is the start of the new water year. So as we step through the next couple graphics and throughout the presentation, I'll sort of do a recap of what last water year 26, sort of looked like overall. But over here on the right-hand side is the water year. Overall, we ended up just slightly below average. But when you look at all the different basins, you can see running right down the spine of the district down here, those are all the lowest rainfall totals, with the Keys being the lowest, followed by the EAA, Lake Okeechobee, and Water Conservation Area 3, and Everglades National Park. So for the rains that did fall throughout the last water year, the majority of them were over on the east and west coast, with the center of the district having some of the lower rainfall totals overall. Where we stand right now in the upper chain of lakes, as I've talked about the last couple months, they're continuing their recession down in their summer pools down here. So those operations are going. You can see you've gotten some rains, but we've still maintained those recessions both in East Lake and West Lake. Lake Kissimmee, continuing to maintain flows down the river with some of the drier weather up north. Lake Kissimmee has started declining a little bit more than it had in the last month when we were here. And Cassandra will walk through what that means to the river.
So the mean depth on the river has been unchanged from 1 month ago, and we're at about 3/4 of a foot on the floodplain. However, we've lost a lot of the smaller pools that we saw last year, and now we're pretty much seeing a uniform dryness across the area. Flows have decreased a little bit at S65A down to 320 CFS, which is consistent to what we normally see in this time of year. So flows through S65A have been low since back in December and below the bank full threshold, which is what's keeping the floodplain dry. Average flow through recently has been 310 CFS, and the oxygen that is in the water that is in the channel is well oxygenated, so the fish and the benthos are not struggling for oxygen, thank goodness.
So looking at how water's moved around the northern portion of the system for the last water year, you'll see on the graphics both here and down here. Looking back at the last several years, water year 24, 25, in comparison to what we see in 26, overall for water year 26, is that 47 inches of rainfall. It's a little bit less than water year 25 and a fair amount less than water year 24. But when we look this graphic and the subsequent one a little bit later on in the presentation, if we just separate rainfall in the northern portion of the district versus the southern portion of the district, a little bit more this year in the northern portion than we had last year, but still less than in 2024. And that's reflected in the numbers over here in comparison to the inflows to Lake Okeechobee. This past year, only about 1.3 million acre feet, which is lower than the two preceding years, whereas water year 24, if you remember, that one was a relatively wetter year, had about 2 million acre feet of water coming into Lake Okeechobee itself. For the East Coast, out the C44 basin and from Lake Okeechobee, there weren't any water moved to the St. Lucie estuary this past water year. Given the lower levels in Lake Okeechobee, a lot of that water moved back into the lake right there, so that's 68,000 acre feet. Upper East Coast, just a little bit less than 200,000 acre feet of water came out of C23-24 into the St. Lucie estuary, with a little more than 120,000 acre feet coming out of around the Fort Pierce area into the Indian River Lagoon. Over on the West Coast, for the water year, just a little bit more than 800,000 acre feet had been moved to the estuary, combined from the basin and Lake Okeechobee, with the Lake Okeechobee contribution being right around 88,000 acre feet. So looking at the projection on the lake, I'll jump over this one and show the 4-panel one that I started a couple months back, so you can see how the projections have changed each of the months since February. So just looking back between April and then here this month in May, slight decrease in the 50% projection. Is just bouncing right around the water shortage management band as it starts to rise when we get into the wet season. But more importantly, what you'll notice is the tail end out here in comparison to what it had there last month in April. That tail end, after we get past the wet season into the dry season, is a little bit higher. And that's reflective of what we've been talking about here, those wetter months from the forecasted El Nino condition. So comparing April now to May throughout the wet season shows a little bit slightly drier, leaning a little bit below average for the wet season. And I'll talk more about that later on in the presentation, but then you get into that forecasted El Nino in the dry season when that tail starts coming up, and we'll see what that may or may not bring us when we get out there in a couple months.
So looking at the lake over the past month, the inflow into the lake has been pretty low at about 25,000 acre feet in April, and a total release of 210 acre feet, and a lot of evaporation and very little rainfall directly into the lake, and all of that combined resulted in a drop in depth of about 1/4 foot off of the lake. Also, you can see the flows over here recently in May. There was a lot of releases to the south, and almost all of that water went to our STAs. So where are we in comparison to the ecological envelope? We are about a half a foot below the ecological envelope and about 0.6 of a foot above the water shortage management band. And as you can see, the stage in the lake has been declining since the beginning of January. Currently, the western marsh is fully exposed, with the lake level being at about a little over 10 for NAVD 88, 10 feet. And what we are seeing is that there are birds who are in there using that area, but they are not nesting. And I'll get into the details of that with this slide. So we are seeing well above average bird usage of the lake for foraging, and this is well above the 10-year average and the interquartile range. And as I've been saying most of the dry season, this is the result of this being the primary area available for them to forage. A lot of the other areas that they would normally be are dry, so this is where they're coming. However, they are not nesting. So our current estimate for nesting is over here. We're at about 850 nests, which is well below the 10-year average. We've got a few more surveys to go, but it is very unlikely that that number is going to budge too much higher. So we're not seeing nests, but we are seeing foraging. Conditions in the lake are pretty good from a chemistry perspective. The chlorophyll A concentration is still pretty low and actually dropped a little bit in the pelagic region. And that, you can see that little drop right there. And that is mostly probably due to an increase in turbidity. By the way, these numbers are April 6th data, so things may have changed in the past month, but these are April data. And the other thing to note is the dissolved inorganic nitrogen concentrations have increased a little bit, but they are still well within the normal concentrations for this time of year. The algal bloom that has been persistent on the lake switched from the southern end earlier in the winter over into the western zone, over into Fish Eating Bay, and has been pretty much hanging out there for the last several months. You can see that there's a little spot there that looks pretty intense. We actually had staff going out at the day that this satellite image was taken, and they could see no visible bloom on the water. One of the thoughts is that the dominant algae that's at that location is what's called picoplankton, which means that it's microscopic, and it's not microcystin. So that is good, and we're seeing normal, this is where the algal bloom normally is at this time of year. So here are the species for the bloom last detected back in April 6th. And what you can see here is that we have no microcystins on the lake as far as the toxins are concerned, that the communities throughout the lake are mostly mixed, and that we do see a couple of bloom conditions, and they are right where the satellite said that they would be in the western portion and a little bit down in the south, but otherwise we're looking very good with the algae in the lake. Moving over to the St. Lucie estuary, we've had about 200 CFS flow into the estuary over the past week. All of that came from the basin. We haven't received any lake water since March of 2025. We did see this lovely little bump here back in mid-April, and what that did is it drove the salinity down in the estuary back into the optimum range for adult oysters. And you can see the salinity gradient between April and May has significantly moved downstream, which is good. This is where we want to see the higher salinities. So the salinity gradient currently in that estuary is ideal. And good news, we are starting to see the oysters. The oyster spat settling for April. This range is for mid-March to mid-April results. We are seeing that the oysters have started to spawn and the spat have started to settle. And you can see this grayed out area. This is the salinity conditions, and they are well within the optimum envelope for oysters. Moving over to the Caloosahatchee, over the past week we had 356 CFS coming in to the estuary, with almost 200 CFS of that coming from the lake. Again, you can see that storm event that we had in mid-April, and it resulted in a small dip in the salinities in the lower estuary. The salinity gradient between April and May is pretty similar. It's slightly lower, but it's about where it was and where it normally is for this time of year. So, more good news on the oyster front. We are seeing oyster spat have settled, and especially down at the Bird Island area, we've got 11.3 spat per shell, which is quite high and nice to see for this time of year, even though the salinities were slightly elevated in the stress range. For the upper part of the estuary, we are seeing salinities in the optimum range for tape grass at the S79 structure and Val I-75 bridge, but still remaining in the damaging range at Fort Myers. We also have had a brief reprieve with the MFL. We came above the MFL for almost a month, but we are now down, just the past couple of days, we're now back down below the MFL flow. I'd like to remind everyone that this is still considered one exceedance. Even though we were below, went back above, and now we're back below, this is still only one exceedance. And as I've mentioned, the reservoir is not currently online, fully functioning yet, so this is not unexpected.
So looking at how water's moved around the southern portion of the system, you can see down here at the bottom, the rainfall over the southern portion. So we've had less rainfall over the southern half of the district in comparison to the last 2 water years. Just slightly less in comparison to last year, but a pretty decent amount less comparison back to 2024. And you'll remember some of those emergency deviations back during that time. But overall, what that has meant, inflows to the conservation areas, just less than 800,000 acre feet have flowed into the water conservation areas this water year. That's only about 40% of the water that was the prior year, and less than half of the water that was in 2024. So what that means to Everglades National Park, inclusive of some of this return seepage over here on the eastern side of the park, only about a third of the water this past water year, just less than 600,000 acre feet in comparison to the previous year in 2025, has been moved down into the park. So the STAs, we just started the water year, so there hasn't been a whole lot of water processed through the STAs, but looking back at last water year, 2026, just a little bit less than 700,000 acre feet were treated and processed through the stormwater treatment areas.
As has been mentioned, we are now in QBEL, so I wanted to walk us through a little bit what exactly that means. So the water quality based effluent limit has what we call the 2-part test. So there's 2 components that we need to meet within a 5-year period. The first is the one that's most complicated to understand. So it is 13 parts per billion as an annual flow weighted mean in more than 3 out of 5 years on a rolling basis that we cannot exceed. It's a little challenging to read that. So let me flip it around for you. For at least 2 years in a 5-year period, we have to have each STA have an outflow concentration of 13 parts per billion. So that's what that sentence means. 2 out of 5 years have to be 13. And then all of them, all years, we have to be 19 or below. So those are our 2-part tests. We are in the first month of the first year of QBEL, so we have a ways to go to know how we're going to do, but I will provide you with an assessment of how we did last year in the next slide. The QBEL is for helping us meet the water quality standards for the what's called the TP criterion in the Everglades, but it is not the TP criterion. It is designed to assist with meeting the TP criterion, and that's why the numbers are different. That's why it's 13 and not 10. There is a built-in assumption that flow through the canals and then into the Everglades will also help us get through that extra 3 parts per billion. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood that as well. And this 13 and 19 part per billion 2-part test is for each STA individually. It's not a combined average. And as I mentioned, we are just at the start of this. So let me show you where we were. First off, I want to mention that this data is preliminary. As Drew said, we'll provide you with the final numbers in next month. And these numbers could change, but are unlikely to change in any meaningful way. So over the past water year, we had close to 700,000 acre feet, as John said, going to the STAs, with a little over 100,000 of that coming from the lake. And most of that flow went to STA 3-4. It is the largest STA, and it can receive that much water without issue. This is the graph that I really want you to focus on here. So the dark blue is the inflow concentrations, and the light blue is the outflow concentrations. STA 1 East, 18. STA 1 West, 19. STA 2, 16, STA 3-4, 13. So we did really, really well there. Okay, STA 5-6 was 105. That doesn't look so good, except for when you look at what happened. That STA was actually performing really well for most of the wet season until we got to September, and we had one rain event that had really high inflow concentrations and also one number in the flowway 5 that was really high outflow. And that one event with that one number and that one flowway is what got us this ridiculously high average. We were unable to get back down to what would be the normal concentrations because of that one outlier. So yes, STA 5-6 does not look good, but that is from one outlier. So I just want to make that clear. And then also, on average, we were able to maintain our target stages throughout the year, so we did very well there. So let me dig in a little bit more on 5-6. Yes, we had water year 26, we had that one outlier. We now know how and why that happened, and we have been able to create scenarios to help us avoid that ever happening again. The first and most beneficial thing is we now have a fully functioning FEB, the C139, and it is doing phenomenally well. It is removing 77% of the phosphorus concentration that goes into it. So average flow going into it is at 210 ppb, and outflow is a very low 48 ppb. That puts the STA in very good position for meeting QBEL if you have really low inflow concentrations. So that will really help us a lot in meeting QBEL. And the second is that we have instituted some very interesting ways to keep our cells hydrated as much as possible, including moving water internally through internal culverts, which is what we did last water year to help maintain these cells in a hydrated state. And so we've been able to implement some creative solutions to help keep these cells hydrated. I also wanted to mention that yesterday we went through a tabletop exercise, and one of the scenarios was, what do we do if STA 5-6 has a outflow concentration that's really high? So we ran through all the scenarios, all the things that we can do. It was very much like we do for our hurricane preparation. It was a trial run to run through all the what ifs and the scenarios, and there was all the people were, so our scientists were there, our water managers were there, Our veg management folks were there, our leadership team was there, and it was a really useful exercise. And I think we were able to work through a lot of situations, especially for 5-6. And so we're in really good shape to handle whatever's coming at us this water year. So this is where we are with our water depths within the STAs. 1 East, Central Flowway is still offline for leveling and some vegetation growing, so that will continue to be in the yellow for the remainder of the water year. I also want to note that there's an addition to our map. This is expansion 2 of STA 1 West. It is now online and functioning, so we thought we would add it to your map. And then, as you can see, STA 5-6, we've still got some cells that are dried out, and we have plans for how to handle that. Mostly it's going to be put water in there slowly, have it hydrate it, hold the water. We're not going to let the water out until it gets fully treated. So I think that's it for the STAs. Yep. Moving down to the Everglades. They are a mixed bag of wet and dry. So the upper areas, both Water Conservation Area 1 and 2, we've got water above ground, although there are certain areas that are starting to dry out a little bit in the northern area of 1 and the little northern area of 2A are also drying out. 3A has received very little rainfall, very below average, so we're seeing below ground water depths in those areas. And then, of course, Big Cypress National Preserve is well below ground, especially along Tamiami Trail. And as far as their comparisons to the 20-year average, Water Conservation Area 1 is in the 30th percentile overall of what its normal depths. Big Cypress National Basin is below average in the center of the preserve. We're at the 10th percentile for 3A and 3B. And then in the Everglades National Park, it's a bit of a mixed bag with below average in the northeast and above average in the southeast. So what does that mean on the ground? So this is the northern part of this section, Conservation Area 1 and 2. And we are well within the 50th percentile for Conservation Area 1 at the site 7, and there was a reversal here, you can see that, and there was also a little reversal here. That had the unfortunate effect of the birds that had been foraging in those areas decided to move elsewhere, and so we did see a reduction in foraging in both of those areas. And then at the lower part of 2A is in the 90th percentile. It's still pretty high. Moving down into 3A, you can see in each of the areas we are below ground for the water depths, and this has had some significant impact on the wildlife in this area. So this picture here is a picture of a slough, and this is an alligator hole, and it is the remaining water in that slough for that area. It's the only refuge. These are having significant consequences to the wildlife. There are no birds foraging, there are no birds nesting, there are no fish, there are no prey for the birds to eat. It's been a pretty devastating year for birds and wildlife in this area. And also concerns is peat oxidation. We don't want to lose our peat. That's a problem. We don't want it to decompose away. But with low water levels below ground, that is very likely occurring. So let me give you a picture of what's happening with the birds system-wide. So we have wet conditions in the north, and we have dry conditions in the middle, and we've got wet conditions at the bottom. We've got a little bit of foraging in Water Conservation Area 1, but they're not nesting. Or excuse me, they're nesting, but they're not foraging right here. They're actually seen in the ag fields and urban areas is where they're doing their foraging right now. So not the best scenario for the longevity of these bird populations. And what it really shows is the importance of 3A and having that hydrated at the right level at the right time with the moderate recession rates over the dry season. So let me get into the numbers with you. Over the past year, we have seen only 3,500 nests in this area. That is well below the 10-year average of over 47,000 nests. So we are seeing the lowest nesting we have ever seen in 30 years. There are no wood stork nests, and most of the great egret nests have failed. In fact, there's very little activity anywhere in the Everglades except for up in Water Conservation Area 1. And those are by the white ibis. And again, the primary cause for this is lack of water in 3A and the lack of appropriate recession rates for their foraging and nesting conditions. So it's super critical that we get the conditions right throughout the system in order for birds to be successful. Okay, the wildfire updates, which I promised. We had a couple of fires in the Highway 1 fire in late April. It is now resolved. It was over 9,000 acre feet, well contained. Max Road fire, I left the stats off because as of May 13th, it was ongoing, but as of this morning, it has been resolved. The total acres burned were over 11,400. So that one has completed this morning. And there were two other fires that are currently ongoing. One is in Homestead. It's the 172nd Avenue. It's a little over 300 acres and it's 80% contained. And then there's another small fire west of Kendall. It's about 5 acres, also mostly contained. But that's it in South Florida. And then lastly, Florida Bay. Salinity conditions on average have dropped throughout the bay by 0.4, excuse me. You can see in this here, the headwaters of Taylor Slough Bridge, the water is below ground, but there does remain water in the remaining part of the slough, so there is connectivity to the Florida Bay. Salinity conditions in each of the basins are within their interquartile range, and the western region is at the hypersalinity threshold, but is very normal for this time of year, and there are no concerns for the seagrasses at this time.
So looking at just water depths, I know you saw it in some of the previous graphics, but just from a hydrograph perspective, you can see Area 1 is above its schedule. It got a fair amount of rain back here a couple weeks ago, but it's been coming down, closing in on its schedule. Area 2 has been relatively steady. It's got a little bit more of a recession has started just recently after some of these rains have passed. And then, of course, Area 3 has been below its regulation schedule pretty much for the last several months and just bouncing back and forth from an overall average perspective in comparisons to its floor. But it's really this gauge here that we use to judge whether or not it's above or below the floor elevation, which it has been for the better part of the last month and a half. South Dade conveyance system is pretty stable right now. It has been fluctuating back and forth over the weeks with some of the rains coming and going as to whether or not we are making water supply deliveries down the South Dade conveyance system versus just retaining as much water as we can from those rainfalls and terminating those water supply deliveries. So it's sort of back and forth over there the last couple weeks. But for right now, the South Dade is relatively stable. So Florida Drought Monitor, as of last week, you can see the majority of the extreme drought still extends, and you saw it in some of Cassandra's graphics, especially over here in Big Cypress, how dry it is over there. But we'll continue to keep an eye on that, and hopefully it will start to dissipate as the rains come here in the next couple weeks. Hurricane forecast. We've talked a lot about El Nino and its potential formation. The effect that it has on the tropical season is sort of when you have an El Nino condition over in the Western Pacific, those trade winds, when they get over to the Atlantic basin, they sort of shear the top off of hurricanes and they inhibit their formation. So that's why when we look for 2026, forecasted numbers are lower than what was back in 2025. So some of those sea surface temperatures vary. In the Atlantic, they're warmer, but they're slightly cooler over on the eastern side. But it'll be really that El Nino condition and how much of that wind shear tears the top off the hurricanes as we move into hurricane season. But, you know, as everybody always says, it's only one that'll ruin your day. And I'm sure, Mr. Chair, you can testify to that, or actually two. But looking at the Climate Prediction Center, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, right now through July, we're leaning above, and then we get into this pattern of slightly below from August through October. And then this is when we start getting into that forecasted El Nino, going back to leaning above from December into February as we look out into that dry season. So it kind of goes back and forth. Some of the wet season is forecasted below, and that's why you saw those ever so slightly downshift in the wet season projection for Lake Okeechobee, but then that tail end is seeing this above normal rainfall as we get out farther into the dry season around into 2027. So I know this is very busy, but the question I've gotten asked most in the last 2 weeks is, when is the wet season going to start? So what this is every single wet season from 63 to 2025 all stacked up. On the left-hand side is the start dates, right-hand side, end dates. What I'll draw your attention to right here is this dashed black line. Is the median start date for the wet season since 1963 is May 22nd. 75% of the time, the wet season is started by May 29th. So that's a very long-winded way of saying the meteorologists are reasonably confident that in the next 2 weeks, it's gonna start. So over the 2 weeks, you can see right there, the week 1 is probably below average rainfall, but then when we get into week 2, it's probably above average, but there's still a little bit more uncertainty associated with that. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you both very much for the presentation. I appreciate it. Is there any board member has a comment or question? Colonel Norman?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Dr. Armstrong, I have a question regarding the measurement of the parts per billion in the STAs. I'm curious, how do we measure that? What's the mechanics of measuring that? Does each cell have a water monitoring, or can you explain that?
Yes, ma'am. So each flowway has a station that is considered the compliance station, and it is right in front of where our outflow is for that flowway. So each flowway will get measured, and then those get averaged together for the total concentration that will be the compliance for that STA.
And for the inflows, does that, even though that's not a compliance measure, is the inflow also measured at the inflow station?
There's usually one compliance point at the inflow. It's usually the gate structure that opens the water up for the entire STA. That will be the it's not compliance, but that will be the inflow concentration for that particular STA.
So that makes me think, as you explain it, that there's 2 stations at an STA. Is that all we have, or do we have others that are monitoring for our own purposes at the district?
Yes, ma'am. I'm glad you mentioned that. We do have other stations in the STAs, and in fact, we just implemented or are getting ready to implement some supplementary monitoring to make sure that we know what's going on within the STA flowways. So some midpoint flowway sampling will occur. We've also got a new system that we've put out called New Lab, which will help us get eyes on the water quality in real time. And that is not put at the compliance point, but in an area near it, so that we can see how we're doing with the water concentrations. Instead of having to wait the week to get the results back from the lab, we have a sense of it before. That is new, and it's only in one flowway right now, but if it proves to be beneficial, we will consider putting it in other STAs. I don't know why I keep saying estuaries. But yes, we are implementing multiple sampling points throughout the STAs to make sure that we have full eyes on the whole system.
So that's very helpful. Maybe at our next board meeting, maybe you could highlight a little bit of that in your report to us.
Definitely.
Thank you so much. Okay.
So if I can, let me provide a little bit more detail to what Cassandra is describing. When you look at the STAs over here on the right side of this graphic, 1 East, 1 West, and STA 2, those inflows and those outflows are through pump stations. The ones over here on the left side, STA 5-6 and STA 3-4, they're pumped inflows but gravity outflows. So when Cassandra described, and I'll take STA 3-4, the inflow point, there's one off the North New River is a pump station that measures inflow concentrations. There's one on the Miami Canal and it measures inflow concentrations. But then when you get to the discharge of the flowways, each of the flowways has gravity structures, and we have monitoring on those gravity structures, and that's the mathematical composite that Cassandra described. However, for STA 2, it's a pumped inflow and a pumped outflow. So the compliance point for STA 2 is just one pump station on the inflow side, measuring those concentrations, and then 2 pump stations on the outflow side is where that. But we still do have individual flowway monitoring, as Cassandra described. Same thing in 1 East. It's a pump station that comes in, and there's just one pump station that discharges out, and that's the compliance point for STA 1 East. So it's different depending on which STA you're talking about, whether or not you're doing the math and combining multiple locations or versus a single location.
But let me ask you a question, John, based upon what Dr. Armstrong said. If there's one compliance station on the outflow, does it matter whether it's gravity or a pump station?
Yes, because you're only going to get one if it's a pump station.
And how many for a gravity?
So STA 3-4, there are 4 gravity discharge structures coming out of flowway 1.
Okay.
2 of them have been identified as compliance points. You sample those 2, you get the flow and concentration that went through those structures, and combine it with flow and concentration from 4 other structures on the other flowways, and then that's the mathematical equation that Cassandra was describing to come up with the 13 parts per billion there.
Great. So that's maybe in your next report. We could dig into that a little bit, but that's very helpful. Thank you so much.
Can I follow up on that? If you're not in compliance at one of your compliance points, can you hold the water, increase the residency, and try and come into compliance with it?
So as Cassandra was describing what occurred in STA 5-6. So at the end of the day for STA 5-6, a similar situation. It's these structures over here. There are several of them that have been identified as that's where you sample to determine compliance, and then you average them all together, and that gets you that 105 parts per billion here. And what she was describing was this flowway right here, flowway 5, had one reading in 1 month that was a very high discharge concentration coming out of these 2 structures right here. The rest of all of these structures had lower concentrations, but when you throw that into the equation, that's what jacks up the number to 105, which causes you to compare it back to 13 and 19.
Okay.
So what do you do? He's asking if you hold it instead of...
Correct. So, sorry.
So you don't discharge?
Correct. What she was describing was this water year, we've instituted a practice in these 2 flowways to try to get them wet. If you remember let me find it again, where is it? The water depths here. These are these 2 flowways. You can see they're dry. So we're trying to take whatever rainfall does fall within the basin, hydrate those, let them sit, and hold on to that water as long as we can, so to rehydrate them and get some of that reflux back out of the soil and let the plants start growing, and then assimilate that phosphorus before we have to discharge. So again, thank you for the prompt, Drew. Yes, we are trying to hold the water back into those treatment cells to prevent those discharges.
Thank you. Mr. Hurley?
Couple questions. So on the gravity discharges, what would be a typical spread of values? I know you averaged them, but are we talking about 5 to 20, or, I mean, what would be?
You mean in concentration?
Yeah, you said you averaged them to get that one number, whether it's 13 or 16 or whatever it was.
Yeah, within a flowway, they tend to be very close.
Okay.
Between flowways, they can be very different depending on, so each flowway has its own unique personality. So the concentrations within an STA, but between the flowways, those can be different, especially if we've got a short circuit in one or some vegetation is struggling in another one. We try to keep track of those and try to minimize that type of variance, but it does occur.
So if you're evaluating a system and you on 5 and 6 where you had, I'm assuming it was a massive outlier that brought the average way up. I mean, wouldn't you just normally, if you're evaluating the system, remove the outlier and just see how the system's actually performing?
Unfortunately, that's not the
I know
way.
that's not the law, but
Yeah.
in terms of evaluating whether the system, as it sits, is capable of doing the job.
Yes, so to that point, we have looked at the math for if you take out that one outlier, how that ST did. And on average, we generally were between 20 and 25. There were a couple of 30s, but we were in that range. So it still was not going to meet the Q-Bell of 19, but it was close. It was, just maybe 10 parts per billion higher. But that one outlier was 758, if I remember correctly, parts per billion. That messed the average up significantly, but all the rest of the flowways for all of the rest of the year, we actually did have one that was 19, ranged in the 20s.
Is sampling error a consideration?
It can be, and we have a protocol for reanalyzing samples. If we do get a sample that looks questionable, we'll have the lab run it again. What happened with that particular outlier is that it had gone through flowway 5, which was dry. And we had a rain event that prevented us from being able to hold that water back. And we also did not have the eyes on the water prior to releasing it. So we did not realize we had that high concentration until after we had to release. But because of the way the rain came, the FEB was still in the testing phase, and so we could not put water into the FEB. It had to go into the STA, and it had to flow through. That ended up with that really high concentration. So going forward, we have put in protocol to make sure that that scenario does not play out again.
Thank you.
Ms. Bergeron?
Thank you. The inflows into 5 and 6, is the nutrient level higher than the other STAs, or?
On average, yes, it can be. Now with the FEB, we're going to see really low inflow concentrations coming into the STAs, but that basin does historically have higher inflow concentrations than the other basins.
Because the inflows of nutrients, do we know what the level would have to be and what the capability is of the STA?
There has been a lot of studies on how the inflow concentrations relate and predict the outflow concentrations. We have found, and Tracy Picone and Hung-Ying Zhao have published a paper on how those correlate with each other. They do find that we do not get the best performance when we have really high inflow concentrations. So that will impact how the STAs are performing. So even if they're performing at rock star level, removing 90%, if you've got 500 parts per billion coming in, 90% is not going to get you to Q-Bell, even though the STA is doing a fantastic job.
Anyone else?
There's a level of inflow that would be very difficult for the STAs to meet the Q-Bell. I have one other question too, and I always bring this up. 2A is a foot above, and 3A is 3 2 feet below, and we've got fires in 3A. What's the purpose of not opening the S11s and let this water move south? Do we have a, I always question that, as you well know,
So you
John.
remember last month when we talked about it, there was a lot of the foraging was going on in 2A, and it was the only location for foraging. I don't know if Cassandra, if you
I
can
can't
speak to
hear
how
you.
those conditions have changed in the last month since then in the foraging activity.
Yes, foraging in 2A has actually declined because we did have a reversal with some rainfall that came into that area. So the birds have moved out of 2A. They actually are up in Conservation Area 1 now. That has the better water depths for those birds. So the water level, we were having a nice drying front in 2A, and that disappeared with the recent rainfall event, and so the birds left that area. But the water levels are high in 2A.
Well,
now
it just seems very unnatural that we'd be a foot above in 1 and 2 foot below in 3A north and south. And I know I bring this up a lot. This seems very unnatural. And
Yeah, now that condition that Cassandra has described has changed from last month to this month, we are looking at starting to move some of that water that's in 2A down into 3A, because now the birds are not using 2A as foraging habitat as much as they were a month ago. And that was what the desire was last month, is to allow them to continue to forage there, because it was the only location within the Everglades that they were. But now due to the reversals and those rain events, that activity has decreased, so there is an opportunity to start moving some of that water, which we'll be discussing with the Corps over the next week or so.
okay, thank you.
Thank you all. We'll move now to monthly financial report with Ms. Heater.
Good morning. So I have 2 items I'd like to give you an update on. So the first one is the monthly financial. The monthly financial is through the month of March. So thus far, through the month of March, we've collected $721 million in new revenue, and we've expended $577 million. From the last report that I provided you, which was through February, so from February to March, we've collected an additional $50 million. 11 was in ad valorem, 34 in intergovernmental, and 5 in the investment earnings, permit fees, and leases. The revenue collected thus far, the $721 million, $323 million from intergovernmental, $366 from ad valorem, and $31 million from invested funds, license permit fees, and leases. Expenditure highlights: the $577 million is made up of $28 million or 5% from our science areas, $12 million or 2% from regulatory, $508 million or 88% from Everglades and operations and maintenance, and then the $27 million is from administrative and outreach, which is 5%. On average, we're spending about $96 million per month. Last year it was about $90 million per month. And the budget is 69% obligated thus far. So the second report is the 2025 Lake Belt Mitigation Report. You should have received a copy of that. And that is statutorily required that the interagency committee provides an annual report to the governing board. The committee members, just a recap, the committee members, voting members, is comprised of Ms. Reynolds. She is the committee chair. The Florida Department of Environmental Protection, Miami-Dade County Department of Regulatory and Economic Resources, Florida Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services, and then a non-voting member is Miami-Dade Limestone Product Associations. So the highlights for the financials, those highlights are December 31st, 2024, we had $13.6 million. During 2025, $1.8 million was transferred to the trust fund within the district from the Florida Department of Revenue. $638,000 was reported as investment income. Expenditures, we expended $5.3 million. Net revenue balance of $10.8 million. There are details of all that in Appendix B and C. Some of the approved committee activities is your main expense is the Abiaki Prairie project, the C-139 project, which your engineering and land management staff are overseeing. The Lake Belt water quality monitoring was about $288,000, and then O&M costs, which is handled by our field stations for the Dade Broward levee structures for about $14,000. So all the expenditures and revenues are in line with prior years. So that concludes my reports.
Well, thank you, Ms. Heater. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
We'll go now to final public comment if there's any.
Yes, we'll hear from Ben Olson.
Hello again. From the beginning of my neighbors and my involvement in WERP in August of 2022, we have asked for seats at the table. Governing board, you were the first to come around to that. That decision came about in part due to research gathered by the Freedom of Information Act, showing positions held behind closed doors did not align with publicly stated positions with respect to WERP. I know I'm a broken record here, but now more than ever, we need transparency in Everglades restoration. In previous meetings, you've heard my ideas about an accountability subgroup authorized under the South Florida Ecosystem Restoration Task Force, comprised of engaged members of the public to audit, analyze, and review ecosystem restoration projects to ensure in a transparent fashion what is actually said in these meetings is what's being said behind the scenes. I know that's a big ask, but I think I have an ask that's far more manageable in the meantime. The Feeder Canal Basin Water Quality Program is a state-led, state-funded project. I think it's time we create a representative committee of all involved stakeholders to regularly meet to discuss the ongoing process and solutions in an open and transparent method. Representatives from the Miccosukee, representatives from the Seminoles, landowner representatives from south of Wingate Mill, north of Wingate Mill, and frankly, Looneyville, who has been left out of this conversation despite having every right to be involved. They are just as impacted by the federal and state plans with respect to Region 2 and deserve a seat at the table as well. As I said earlier, I'm happy to sit down with tribal representatives to discuss my research, among other things. I'm happy to be shown what I got wrong, but these conversations need to be in the public eye and in public view. Governing board, any landowner who is impacted should have a seat at the table. I believe we all agree with that. The Seminole letter to me acknowledged that they too are landowners who care deeply about the environment that they steward. I completely understand and respect their rights as landowners. The remaining private landowners have only ever asked for that respect in kind. My research isn't about my land. My land certainly benefits from it, I openly acknowledge that, but it's not about my land. It's not about my neighbors' lands. It's about getting restoration right. The first thing that went right with WERP was water management agreeing to fix the disastrous Region 2 plan. That came about because you acknowledged the landowners and their knowledge at the table. I'm asking you to legitimize that setup and allow for a set number of representatives from each impacted portion, both tribes, the private landowners from north and south of Wingate, and Looneyville, to meet and solve the Feeder Canal Basin Water Quality Program together. Any other state agency would be welcome. Each group could decide who represents them in these meetings. I have no hard feelings for how we were treated for years, and I hold no grudges in this. I only ask for honesty and truth. And when we have those combined with the environmental experts you have among the tribes, the landowners, and your staff, I don't see how we get WERP's solution wrong. But that only comes about through transparency and open conversation. And so again, I'm looking forward to meeting with tribal representatives, and I look forward to having this same dialogue with them. But we need honesty in this process. I was going to end by saying, help me bring everyone to the table, but I've already spoken with staff, and it seems like we're about 80% there. They're already planning on setting a meeting. I'm just asking to make that a regularly reoccurring thing where we can all speak together. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of your time.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Mr. Chairman, we have no additional public comments.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. We'll move now to a board comment. Mr. Sponswood?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nothing from me other than to reiterate Tom's comments that it's been a year. phenomenal year. It's been great to work with all of you and just really getting started. Takes a long time to really understand everything that it takes to make this district work and operate, and continue to be impressed by board members here and staff and our leadership. So thank y'all.
Thank you. Mr. Bergeron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'm honored to sit with all my board members, and I want to thank our staff. I think we got the greatest staff in the world, not just America. And we got a big job on our hands, and it's, like I said before, if we can send someone to the moon in the rocket ship, I think we can save our Everglades and our quality of life and our drinking water in South Florida, and it's an honor for me to be here. And I hope you enjoy this 52 years of history. And I forgot to tell you, I'm going to give you all a test to make sure you read it, okay? But it's really interesting. And I think when you look at the past 52 years and where we're at today, we're making good progress, but it can teach us a lot because we can learn from the past and make it better into the future. So I just think it's, I look forward to the test I'm going to give you all later on. So long live the Everglades.
Thanks, Mr. Bergeron. Colonel Roman.
Nothing to add, thank you.
Mr. Martinez. Mr. Butler.
No comment today, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Hurley.
I don't have anything else.
I'd like to thank Mr. Bergeron for this book. I look forward to reading it and passing the test. Our next meeting is on Thursday, June 11th at 9 o'clock. That'll be here, and this meeting is adjourned.